Story 1. In college, I bought myself a boyfriend. The deal was that he would stay with me, and I'd cover his family's medical bills. This proud, brilliant scholarship kid swallowed his pride and stayed with me for 4 years. Then my family went bankrupt. When I broke up with him, he was ice cold. Not a word of protest. Years later, I was bussing tables in a karaoke bar, drowning in debt, and he was a tech millionaire dating our class homecoming queen. He asked me, "Do you regret it?" "No," I said. "But I do," he replied. I never thought I'd run into Leonardo again, especially like this. As I set down the fruit platter, I kept my head down, terrified he'd recognize me. Camilla, the homecoming queen, sat beside him. They looked perfect together, a real power couple. "Excuse me," Leonardo called out. "Could you cut the oranges?" With my back to him, I sliced the oranges into thin wedges. A long time ago, when I loved oranges, Leonardo always cut them for me. He was meticulous about it, each slice perfectly uniform. Back then, I thought it was a sign of affection. Later, I realized it was just a habit. He could have been thinking about anything while cutting those oranges, anything but me. Years felt like a lifetime. Somehow, the conversation drifted to college romances. Someone said, "I heard Leonardo had a girlfriend all through college." I froze. Leonardo hummed in agreement. "Wow, for years? That's your entire college experience." Leonardo didn't respond. The guy, sensing the awkwardness, pressed on. "Must be pretty unforgettable, right?" A heavy silence filled the air. Finally, Leonardo let out a soft laugh. "Not really. He was just being polite." Camila chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. "We went to the same school. It was, well, let's say it was tough on him. If it weren't for his ex, we would have been together a long time ago." "Of course, Camila, you're a celebrity. No ex can compare to a star." The atmosphere lightened. I pulled my cap lower, desperate to escape. The fruit knife slipped, nicking my finger. I hissed, drawing attention. "What was that? Can't even cut fruit properly?" Camila complained. "I'm so sorry, I'll get a fresh platter," I mumbled, grabbing the dish and making a dash for it. "Wait!" Leonardo's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. "Turn around." My feet were rooted to the spot. 1 second, 2 seconds. My manager appeared, saving me. "So sorry about that. She's new and still learning. The fruit platter is on the house." She winked at me. "Go get a new one, quick." I escaped. "Be more careful next time," my manager told me. "But it's okay, everyone starts somewhere. Just know that if there's a complaint, you won't get paid tonight." "Thank you," I breathed. "No problem. Be extra careful with that VIP room. They're all important guests, especially the young, handsome one in the middle. He owns some fancy tech company, someone we can't afford to offend. I'm kind of scared. Could you take the oranges in for me?" "Sure." I let out a sigh of relief. If there was anyone in the world Leonardo had every right to be offended by, it was me. I was the ex he so easily dismissed. I remember freshman year. Leonardo stood out in the crowd of new students. His faded clothes were a stark contrast to everyone else. He was undeniably poor and undeniably handsome. I loved the cool, quiet tone of his voice, the way his eyelids lowered when he looked at me. Leonardo desperately needed money. Some connected kid had snagged the scholarship he deserved. So one evening after class, I boldly grabbed his hand. "Leonardo, I like you. Go out with me. I'm pretty loaded, we can share my allowance. Or, if that's not enough, I'll pay you for a kiss." He refused, of course. But back then, my life was easy. I didn't understand rejection. The more he pushed me away, the harder I pursued him until his grandfather, the man who raised him, fell critically ill. Without hesitation, I covered the medical bills. Leonardo finally gave in. I foolishly thought I had done him a huge favor. Much later, I realized I got what I wanted, but at a terrible cost to him. Even after we started dating, Leonardo still worked every day. He barely touched my money, but things only got worse. Rumors spread around campus. They said he was selling himself for money. People looked at him differently, whispering cruel nicknames. Oblivious, I'd hold his hand and say, "Don't mind them. They're just jealous." I lived in my ivory tower, completely unaware that Leonardo was fighting a battle all alone. Senior year, my family went bankrupt. I didn't tell Leonardo. I simply called him and said, "Let's break up." "Why?" he asked. "I'm bored, okay?" And that was it. I imagined he felt relieved, finally free. That same day, I tossed my SIM card, deleted my social media, and boarded a train to another city, ready to work and pay off my family's debt. I didn't return until 3 months ago. Leonardo seemed to be thriving. He had always been brilliant, the kind of genius who made everyone else in our department look average. Just 4 years after graduation, he was already a tech entrepreneur featured in business magazines. Camila, our class homecoming queen, had started her acting career in her junior year. I never imagined they'd end up together. Good for them, I thought, pressing a hand to my chest to ease the sudden ache. At 4 a.m., my shift ended. I was the last to leave. My coworkers, assuming everyone had already gone, had turned off the lights and shut down the elevators. I jabbed the elevator button, hoping it would come back to life. "Call someone." Leonardo's voice startled me. Stiffly, I called a coworker. The elevator whirred back to life. Leonardo and I stood in the confined space. "You guys work this late?" he asked, his tone neutral. "We can't leave until all the guests are gone." "Must pay well, huh?" "It's okay." I stared at the floor, my cap hiding my face. Leonardo, seemingly not recognizing me, made small talk and then checked his watch. "This elevator is slow. My girlfriend is probably waiting. She's pretty clingy." That's when I realized he was talking about Camila. "And you? Working this late? Doesn't your boyfriend pick you up?" "I live nearby." The elevator doors opened. I bolted out. Leonardo, calm just moments before, suddenly exploded. "Running away again? Where do you think you're going, Maya? Disappearing without a trace. Do you think it's funny?" Leonardo closed the distance between us, his steps firm and deliberate. He was still the boy I remembered, but the boyish softness had been replaced by a sharp, controlled maturity. "Deleted your social media, disconnected your phone? Even your professors couldn't find you. You're quite the magician, Maya." Slowly, I raised my head and met his gaze. "You must have used your connections, right? My family went bankrupt. My father's still caught in legal battles. He hasn't paid off all the debt yet. Why didn't you tell me?" I was speechless. "Too proud, Miss Evans?" "No." Before I could finish, Camila appeared. "Oh my God, Maya, it really is you." She was even more stunning than in college, every hair perfectly in place. "Long time no see. Everyone's been looking for you. Why haven't we heard from you in 4 years?" "I was down south." "No wonder," Camila said, eyeing my clothes with surprise. "Maya, isn't that the jacket you bought in junior year? It's practically falling apart. Why are you still wearing it?" "I used to throw out clothes after one season." Her question was a clear jab, but I felt nothing. "It's still fine. Still wearable." Camila nodded knowingly. "Are you having a hard time? You should have said something. Old friends can help each other out." She pulled out a card. "Take this. You don't have to pay me back." "Thanks, but I don't need it." I looked at her, then at Leonardo and gave a faint smile. "I'm getting married soon. Be sure to come." The words hung in the air, leaving Leonardo visibly shaken. The karaoke bar was just a side job. I had a full-time job too. On Monday, a new client arrived at the office. My coworkers were whispering. "I heard this guy is a genius. He created this software to find someone. His ex, I think." My stomach turned. A bad feeling crept in. Did he find her? No idea. The software isn't finished yet, but investors are pouring money into it. Huge potential. That's why our boss wants to partner with him. I gathered the necessary documents. Leonardo's voice drifted from the meeting room. "I need to think about the partnership." I opened the door and placed the files on the table. Leonardo's eyes locked onto mine. "What are you doing here?" Working, I replied. This was my main job. My boss looked curious. Maya, you know Mr. Leonardo? I hesitated, then said, We've met. Just met. Leonardo added, his voice tight with anger. I couldn't understand why he was so angry. Wasn't he the one who walked away without a second thought? He pointed at me. Mr. Lee, I'll sign the contract on one condition. Maya Evans becomes my personal assistant. My boss agreed immediately, not even giving me a chance to object. They spent the entire day in meetings. In the evening, I grabbed my bag, ready to leave. Leonardo blocked my path. Where do you think you're going? You haven't dismissed me, Mr. Leonardo, but I can't stay late today. I have something to do. What is it? I have to make deliveries. Leonardo stared at me in disbelief. I used to be the kind of girl who wouldn't even touch takeout. During all 4 years of college, Leonardo worked as a delivery driver after classes. His dinner was often just the free meal provided by the delivery company. Once, I went to see him. He was crammed into a tiny room with other drivers, eating rice from a styrofoam container. Leonardo, how can you eat that? It's not hygienic. His expression tightened. Does it matter if it's hygienic or not? Come on, let's get some steak. I dragged him to a fancy steakhouse where the average meal cost over $70. He stood outside for a long time, silently taking off his delivery uniform. After my own fall from grace, I finally understood how he felt that day. Just like today, it started to snow. The ground was slippery. I fell, spilling the food. I called the customer to apologize, but he just yelled at me. I don't want excuses. Late is late. My scraped palms stung in the cold, but I couldn't stop apologizing. Suddenly, Leonardo appeared, riding my bike. Don't hide your hands, he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes rimmed red. I need to deliver this first. Get in the car. I'll take you. The customer lived on the ground floor. When I handed him the food, he muttered, Seriously? Driving a Porsche to deliver food? I had another delivery waiting. Don't, Leonardo said. I have to. I haven't earned much today. Then tonight, I'll buy it. What? A notification popped up on my phone. He had placed an order and assigned it to me. I'll buy your time for tonight. His words hung in the air, heavy with a weight I didn't know how to handle. Leonardo looked at me with a determination that unsettled me. He was no longer the shy, reserved boy from college. Now, he was a man who knew exactly what he wanted, and it seemed he was determined to make me the center of his plans. I hesitated for a moment before murmuring, That's not necessary. I'm used to handling things on my own. I know you are, but this time let me help, he replied, his voice firm but carrying something deeper, almost concern. That night, he drove me home after I insisted on making one more delivery. The silence during the ride was nearly unbearable. Yet somehow, his presence was comforting. When I finally parked my bike, he watched as I stored away the little I had earned that day. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. In the following days, things began to change. As Leonardo's new personal assistant, I started accompanying him to meetings and projects. To my surprise, he insisted I genuinely contribute. He didn't want just an assistant for paperwork. He wanted me to be an intellectual partner, something that caught me off guard. Over time, the emotional distance between us began to shrink. He was much more human than I remembered. When we were alone in the office or at meetings, he would ask about my life, my family, my ambitions. He seemed genuinely interested, and I found myself more than once responding with a level of honesty I hadn't shown anyone in years. One night, while we were organizing papers for a project, I casually mentioned a problem I was facing. My house's boiler had broken, and with no money, I was getting by with cold showers and pots of hot water. I didn't want help. I only mentioned it as an excuse for my exhausted appearance. He didn't comment, but something in his expression changed. The next morning, I received a call from my landlord. He informed me that an anonymous benefactor had paid for the complete replacement of the boiler and even some extra repairs around the house. I was stunned, but I knew exactly who was behind it. When I confronted Leonardo at the office, he just shrugged. "You should never have to choose between basic comfort and dignity," he said. I didn't know how to respond. He wasn't trying to make me feel ashamed or indebted, but his generosity, which I didn't think I deserved, left me speechless. When I finally managed to whisper a thank you, he gave a slight smile. "You did much more for me back then, Maya. If it weren't for the medicine you bought for my grandfather, I don't even know if I would have finished college. You thought I was with you only out of necessity, but the truth is I was deeply grateful. I still am. No matter what happened between us, I'll never forget that." The sincerity in his words hit me like an unexpected blow. I knew I had hurt Leonardo when I disappeared, but I never thought he held any gratitude toward me. For a moment, the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but full of something unspoken, something beginning to grow between us again. But, as always, Camila didn't take long to appear. During an event where Leonardo took me as his assistant, I overheard whispered comments about my appearance and how I didn't belong in that environment. Camila, with her perfect smile and calculated charm, made a point of completely ignoring me, except when she wanted to show off her superiority. However, Leonardo's reaction surprised me. He, who always seemed unshakable, suddenly intervened during a conversation where the whispers became obvious. His voice was firm and clear when he said, "Enough of this. Maya is beautiful both inside and out. Unlike many here, she doesn't need masks or manipulations to be noticed." The room fell silent. Camila's gaze hardened, but Leonardo completely ignored her, turning back to me. For a moment, I felt a wave of emotions so strong I could barely process it. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to defend me, but he did. And at that moment, I realized the walls I had built around my heart were beginning to crumble. In the weeks that followed, we spent more and more time together. He insisted I participate more actively in projects, and despite the initial tension, I started feeling comfortable around him again. Little by little, the small gestures, a coffee left on my desk, a ride home after a long day, a comment on how well I did something, began to mean more than I was ready to admit. One night, as we finished a project, he looked at me and said, "Maya, why did you never ask for help? You always seem to carry the world on your shoulders, but never let anyone help." "Maybe because I learned to rely only on myself," I replied with a sad smile. He shook his head, his gaze intense. "Maybe it's time to change that." I didn't know what to say, but for the first time in years I felt that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to try. The idea of letting someone into my life again, especially him, didn't seem so impossible anymore. And even though everything seemed to be heading towards something new and unexpected, I knew that our story was far from over. I never imagined that being this close to Leonardo again would awaken such intense feelings. Every moment by his side was a painful reminder that something had changed. He was no longer the boy from college, and I was no longer the girl who had left him behind. Yet something inside me insisted on reigniting that flame. The days spent with him became a confusing mix of comfort and torment. We were closer than ever, working side by side, sharing silences that spoke louder than words. Leonardo looked at me differently now. It was a look filled with memories, curiosity, and something I couldn't quite identify, but that made me feel alive again. But then there was Camila, always perfect, always present. And I couldn't, under any circumstances, cross that line. It wasn't right. He had a life with her, a planned future, and I was just a shadow of the past. Even so, his small gestures were hard to ignore. He brought me hot coffee on cold days, reached out to help me with papers, and sometimes left discreet notes with little inside jokes. Nothing inappropriate, but just enough to make my heart race. I started noticing that he was struggling with something, too. The way his gaze lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. The silence that fell over him whenever Camila suddenly came up in our conversations, as if something held him back but at the same time pushed him closer to me. I tried to keep my distance, tried to remind myself that this couldn't happen, but my heart wouldn't cooperate. It was on a rainy night that everything fell apart. We were stuck at the office because of a storm. Everyone else had already left except the two of us. The sound of rain beating against the windows filled the silence between us. Leonardo was sitting on the meeting room couch, his head in his hands. I sat far away, trying to focus on the report I needed to review, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. "Are you okay?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He slowly lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were tired, but there was something more, a deep sadness. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm living the life I really want to live," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. I didn't know what to say. I just watched him, feeling my chest tighten. "Camila and I... things aren't what they seem," he continued, averting his gaze. "It's like we're trapped in an image we created and can't escape. I don't feel the way I used to." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But with you, Maya, it's different. It always was." My heart nearly stopped. This couldn't be happening. Couldn't let it. "Leonardo, you can't say that. You have someone and I..." My voice faltered. He slowly stood up, walking toward me. He stopped just inches away, and I could feel the heat of his presence. "I know, and I fought against it, tried to ignore it, pretend it was just nostalgia. But it's not, Maya. I can't deny it anymore. Please don't do this," I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. "This will only hurt us." He shook his head. "No, what's hurting us is pretending. I realized I've spent years stuck in something that doesn't fulfill me. And you make me feel alive again. I don't want to live a lie anymore." My breathing grew heavier, and before I could say anything, he took a step back as if to catch his breath. "The day you disappeared, it felt like a part of me left with you. I hated you for it, but now I understand. You had to leave and I had to grow. But now that you're here, I won't let you slip away again." He nervously ran a hand through his hair. "I broke up with Camila." The words came out as a whisper, but they hit me so hard my whole body froze. "What?" My voice was barely audible. "I ended things with her today because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending my heart is somewhere it's not. It's always been with you, Maya." I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to run, escape that moment that was changing everything, but another part, the part that had always loved him, wanted to stay. Leonardo stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I don't expect you to forgive me for everything. I don't expect you to trust me again right away. But I need you to know that all I want now is to be with you. Not out of obligation, not out of debt, but because I love you." Tears silently rolled down my cheeks. Everything I had repressed, all the love I had hidden for so long, came crashing down. He slowly raised his hand, hesitant, and gently touched my face. "You're beautiful, Maya. On the outside, yes, but what holds me to you is who you are inside. You're strong, brave, genuine, and none of that compares to appearances or status. You are everything I need." I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel. I allowed myself to believe. When I opened my eyes, I saw the sincerity in his, no doubt, no hesitation. And then, without words, I simply leaned in. It was a soft kiss at first, as if we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But soon the tension dissolved and we gave in to the moment. A kiss full of everything that had been repressed, everything that had been left unsaid. When we finally pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in years, I believed him. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My 13-year-old nephew met my wife for the first time and said, "I've seen you before." She froze, and what happened next left me shocked. What happened after that moment changed everything I thought I knew. "Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a 30-year-old man who has been through a lot recently. Although some time has passed, I still feel like it all happened yesterday. I wanted to talk about this with someone outside of my family and friends. So here I am. Let me start from the beginning. I was born long after my brother. He was 16 years old when I was born. Due to the large age difference, we never had a close sibling bond. Although he spoiled me a lot, I felt that he treated me more like his own son than like his brother. By the time I was old enough to remember anything, my brother had already left for college. When I was 10 years old, I attended his wedding. They were already expecting a baby at that time, so I was excited not just for the wedding, but also to meet my nephew and have another kid to play with. 5 months after the wedding, my nephew Tony was born. I still clearly remember visiting him in the hospital right after he was born. I was so excited to see his little face and felt an overwhelming amount of love for him. After Tony came home, I spent all the time I could with my brother to help take care of him. As the years passed, my love for Tony only grew. I always offered to take care of him whenever my brother needed help. Instead of seeing ourselves as uncle and nephew, Tony and I felt more like brothers. That's why it was so hard for both of us when I had to move to another state, Florida, to study and work. But I made sure to always call home and keep in touch with my family, especially Tony. The distance did not break our bond. In my last year of college, I met my wife, Kelly. She was a soccer star, and I still don't know how I caught her attention, since I wasn't interested in sports at all. I spent most of my time reading in the library, but one day Kelly found me there and started talking to me. What I loved most about her was how confident and charming she was. Later, after we had been together for a while, she told me that she was actually nervous to talk to me, but I would never have guessed it from the confidence with which she approached me. We went on several dates and quickly realized that although we had different interests, we fit very well together. We shared the same sense of humor and spent all our dates laughing until our stomachs hurt. It didn't take long for us to make our relationship official. I always made it clear to Kelly how much I love my family, so she met them through many video calls. The only person I hadn't told Kelly about was my nephew, Tony. Although Kelly had already met almost all the important members of my family, she still hadn't met Tony. However, I did talk about him a lot. One day, Kelly asked me why she hadn't met my nephew yet, even though I talked so much about him. I said, "Honey, I haven't introduced you to Tony because he's only 11 years old. I want to protect his innocence from my adult life." She replied, "I don't think 11 years old is too young. I'd like to meet him and be a part of his life too. Tony is the most important person to me, but he's still a child. He doesn't need to be involved in my romantic life," I explained. "It seems like you're keeping me away because you doubt the future of our relationship," she said. "What? That's not true at all," I assured her. "You were afraid to introduce me to Tony in case things didn't work out between us. You don't want to introduce him to someone who won't be a constant in his life," she continued. "You've got it all wrong. It's about protecting him, not doubting us," I said. Okay, let's just leave it alone. Just understand that I see a long future for us," she said. "But I'm simply not ready to mix our worlds yet," I explained. I understood why Kelly was upset, but I wasn't ready to involve Tony in that part of my life. I wanted to protect Tony's innocence even though, deep down, I knew I wasn't really doing that. In my mind, he was still that baby I met for the first time in the hospital, and I wanted to keep seeing him that way at least until he became a teenager. 2 years after we graduated from college, Kelly asked me to move in with her and I gladly accepted. I was excited to live with a woman I was so deeply in love with. During that time, I also met Kelly's entire family. Kelly was still a little hurt that I hadn't told Tony about her, but she decided to let it go instead of insisting on the subject. I could tell it still bothered her because she would mention it briefly before changing the subject. When Tony turned 13, I waited a couple of months before finally telling him about Kelly. One day, we connected on a video call while Kelly was out running. "Tony, I have something to tell you," I said. "What is it?" he replied. "I have a girlfriend." "Really? Oh my God. Tell me everything," he exclaimed. "Her name is Kelly. We met in college and we've been together since my senior year." "Is she a good person?" he asked. "She's the best. You're going to love her," I assured him. "Then I can't wait to meet her." "Well, we were actually planning to come over for Thanksgiving." "Wait, seriously? That's bad timing." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I got into that boarding high school I've been talking about for years. I have to be there next month." "That's amazing, Tony. I'm so proud of you." "Yeah, but I won't be there for Thanksgiving." "Don't worry about that. Anyway, I'm planning to marry Kelly, so you'll have plenty of time to meet her." "You're already planning weddings?" "I love it. he said, laughing. Tony looked directly at Kelly for a few seconds, his eyes carrying confusion that quickly turned into recognition. Before I could ask what was happening, he pointed at her with a surprised expression. "I've seen you before," Tony said, clearly confused. Kelly went pale, as if all the blood had drained from her face at once. I looked from one to the other, trying to understand what was going on. Tony's words echoed in my head, and I felt a chill down my spine. Something was clearly wrong. "Where have you seen her, Tony?" I asked, trying to stay calm while Kelly seemed unable to move or speak. Tony hesitated for a second, as if trying to recall some specific detail. She's Dad's girlfriend. I've seen her at our house several times," Tony replied, frowning. "I thought you knew each other since you were always there too." My mind stopped. Every word he said felt like a blow. Dad's girlfriend? The world around me began to spin, and I felt my throat go dry. I looked at Kelly, who now had wide eyes and a look of pure panic. "This isn't true, is it, Kelly?" I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. Every second that passed without a response from her felt like an eternity. She finally opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just mumbled something incomprehensible. Tony was looking at both of us, clearly realizing that he had said something important and maybe even wrong. "Alex, I can explain," Kelly finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "Explain what?" I demanded, now feeling the anger grow inside me. "You were with Tony's dad? You were cheating on me with my brother." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All that love, all that trust, the conversations about marriage. Everything now felt like a big lie. And the worst part was that Kelly couldn't even deny it. She just looked at me with pleading eyes while Tony seemed to realize for the first time that something was very wrong. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Alex," she started. But I was already losing my patience. "Since when, Kelly?" I demanded, my voice now sharp. "Since when have you been cheating on me?" She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. I knew the truth was coming and part of me didn't even want to hear it. But I needed to know. Since before we moved in together," she admitted, her voice barely audible. I stood still. Before we moved in together? That meant that while we were making plans for our life together, while I was introducing her to my family and talking about the future, she was betraying our trust. Not just cheating on me, but cheating on me with my own brother. A knot formed in my stomach and I felt nauseous. "So that's why you insisted so much on meeting Tony, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice filled with contempt. "Because you already knew my brother and wanted to keep up appearances? You wanted everything to look normal while hiding your visits to his house? How could you?" Kelly began crying more intensely, covering her face with her hands. Tony looked shocked, not knowing what to do or say. He was a 13-year-old kid trapped in adult drama, and I felt a deep pain realizing that he was involved in all of this. "You were never honest with me," I continued, my voice now almost breaking. "I loved you, Kelly. I was planning to marry you, to introduce you to Tony because he is the most important person to me. And now I find out you were with his dad. How could you do this?" She tried to approach me, extending her hand, but I took a step back, refusing any contact. "Please, Alex, I made a mistake." "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "A mistake." I laughed bitterly. "This wasn't a mistake. It was a series of choices. You chose to deceive me, chose to be with my brother, chose to lie to me day after day. There is no excuse for this, Kelly." At that moment, Tony started crying as well, feeling the weight of everything that was happening. I didn't know, Uncle Alex. I thought you knew about all of this," he sobbed, his eyes wide with despair. I approached Tony, kneeling down to be at his level, trying to ignore the whirlwind of emotions inside me for a moment to comfort him. "It's not your fault, Tony. You didn't do anything wrong. Okay?" I said, my voice softening a little as I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You just told the truth, and you are not to blame for any of this." Tony nodded, still crying. I turned to Kelly, who was still standing there with the expression of someone who knew everything was over. "I want you to leave," I finally said, my voice cold and determined. "It's over, Kelly. I don't want to see you anymore. You destroyed everything we had." She tried to argue, but I raised my hand, signaling her to stop. "Leave. Leave now." Kelly hesitated, but then she turned and left, still crying. I stayed there kneeling beside Tony, trying to process everything that had happened. I felt a mixture of deep sadness and intense anger. All that time, all that trust, everything had been destroyed in a single moment. Tony hugged me and I hugged him back, trying to find some comfort amidst the chaos. My brother, my own brother, had done this to me. And Kelly, the woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. After Kelly left, I remained silent for a while, still hugging Tony. The pain of betrayal and the revelation was intense, but something else began to grow inside me. The need for answers. I needed to confront my brother. I needed to hear his side of the story. I needed to understand how this had happened. I hugged Tony for a moment longer, then carefully wiped his tears and tried to give him a comforting smile. "It's going to be okay, Tony. But now I need to sort some things out with your dad. All right?" I said to him. He just nodded, visibly shaken. I didn't want to involve him more than he already was, so I left him with my mother, who was visiting and had noticed that something very serious had happened. I quickly explained that we needed to talk privately, and she agreed to take care of Tony. I got into the car and drove to my brother's house, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. Every mile that passed seemed to increase my indignation. How could he do this to me? He knew how much Kelly meant to me, and even so I arrived at my brother's house and knocked on the door hard, my patience running out by the second. It took a few moments, and when he finally opened the door, his face showed surprise at seeing me there. "Alex, what happened?" he asked, but I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. "We need to talk. Now," I said, walking past him and entering the house. He closed the door behind me, clearly confused by my attitude. "Sure, what's going on?" he asked again, seeming genuinely concerned. I turned to him, my expression serious, trying to contain the anger I felt. "It's about Kelly," I started, and I could see his expression change immediately from surprise to something I couldn't quite identify. "Kelly? What happened to her?" he asked somewhat hesitantly. "Don't pretend you don't know, Robert. I know everything. I know you were with her," I said, my voice breaking a little. "I know you were having an affair with my girlfriend." Robert's face paled and he took a step back, completely stunned. "What? Alex, wait. Where did you get that from?" he stammered, clearly in shock. "Tony told me. He recognized Kelly and said she was your girlfriend. How could you do this to me? How could you betray me, your own brother, like this?" I exploded, feeling the anger bubble and the tears form in my eyes. Robert looked completely lost. He opened his mouth several times, trying to say something, but nothing came out. Finally, he took a deep breath and shook his head. "Alex, I didn't know it was Kelly. I never knew she was your girlfriend. She never introduced herself as Kelly to me," he said, his voice desperate, trying to reach me. "She told me her name was Rachel." For a moment, I was speechless. My mind was in a state of confusion, trying to process what he had said. Rachel? She was pretending to be someone else. But even so, the betrayal was still there. "Do you expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice filled with pain. "Do you want me to believe you never realized she was the same person? And even if she used another name, you were still with me while being with another woman. You still betrayed me." Robert seemed on the verge of tears now. He ran his hands through his hair, his expression full of regret and despair. "Alex, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was the same person. We met about a year and a half ago, and she told me she was single. I never connected the dots. I never thought you and she could be the same person," he said, his voice breaking. "If I had known, I would never have done this. I swear, Alex, you're my brother. I would never hurt you like that on purpose." There was sincerity in his eyes, and that only made the situation even more painful because even if he didn't know, even if Kelly had pretended to be someone else, The fact was that my own brother had gotten involved with the woman I loved, and nothing he said could change that. It doesn't matter, Robert. You were with her while maintaining a relationship with another woman. I trusted you, and look where that got us, I said, feeling the anger turn into something darker. A deep sadness. A sense of loss that seemed impossible to overcome. Robert approached me, trying to reach out, but I took a step back, refusing any contact. Please, Alex, forgive me. I would do anything to undo this, anything to regain your trust, he said, tears now running down his face. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the regret in his eyes, and something in me knew he truly hadn't meant to hurt me. But the damage was done and there was no going back. It didn't matter that he didn't know. It didn't matter that he had been deceived by Kelly. The pain was there and I couldn't just pretend everything was okay. I need to leave, I finally said, my voice low and emotionless. I can't stay here. I need time. I need space. You hurt me, Robert, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. He nodded, the pain clear on his face. I understand. Just please know that I love you, Alex. You're my brother and I would give anything not to have caused you this pain, he said, his voice broken. Without saying anything else, I turned and left the house, feeling an overwhelming weight on my chest. That wasn't the outcome I wanted, but it was the only one I could accept at that moment. I left without looking back, knowing that my relationship with my brother would never be the same. As I drove back home, the emptiness inside me seemed to grow, absorbing every positive thought I might have had. It wasn't just Kelly that I had lost. It was also the trust in my own brother. I needed space. I needed time to figure out how to move forward and, above all, I needed to find a way to deal with the pain and betrayal that seemed to have torn every piece of my heart apart. When I got home, I found Tony sitting on the couch, his eyes still red. He looked at me as if searching for some sign that things could go back to normal. I just sat next to him and hugged him, feeling my own tears fall again. It's going to be okay, Tony, I whispered, more for myself than for him. We're going to be okay. Somehow we'll get through this. And there we stayed, just two brothers trying to find comfort in each other while the world around us seemed to have crumbled. When I prepared to leave my mother's house, Tony came to me, his eyes still red from crying. He seemed unsure, as if he didn't know whether he should say something or just stay silent. Couldn't leave him like that. He wasn't to blame for anything that had happened and, as broken as I was, I didn't want him to feel responsible. Uncle Alex, Tony began, but the words wouldn't come out. I simply approached him and hugged him tightly. I felt his small hands wrapping around me and he started sobbing again. That moment hurt more than anything else. I had always wanted to protect Tony from anything painful or difficult, and now there he was, hurt by something I could never have prevented. It's going to be okay, Tony. I promise, I said softly, holding back my own tears. I didn't know if it would really be true, but in that moment, it was what he needed to hear and it was the promise I was willing to try to keep. I hugged him for a long moment before pulling away and running my hand through his hair. Take care of your dad, all right? And take care of yourself too, I said, trying to give him a reassuring smile even though inside everything felt like it was falling apart. Tony nodded, his eyes still wet with tears, and I finally stepped away, giving him one last wave before leaving the house. I knew there was still a lot to resolve, but for now I needed distance. I needed time to breathe and figure out how to move forward. When I got home, I was greeted by a flood of notifications on my phone. Messages and more messages from Kelly. She was begging to meet with me to talk and try to work things out. Words like, "I'm sorry," and "please forgive me," were repeated in almost every message. I just sighed and, with the same determination I had when I sent her away, deleted each one without even opening them. That chapter of my life was closed. In the following days, it felt like I was trying to navigate through unknown territory, one day at a time. I went to work, came back home, and focused solely on maintaining a routine. Sometimes it felt like I was on autopilot, just going through the motions that kept me moving without really processing what had happened. But I knew I needed that. I needed time to heal, even if that healing came through the simplest, most mundane routine. It was at work that I found a kind of refuge. I threw myself into my projects and dedicated myself fully. I volunteered for any extra task, took on responsibilities that others avoided, and made sure to deliver everything in the best way possible. Not because I was seeking recognition, but because I needed to occupy my mind. I needed something to remind me that I still had value. As time went by, I began to see the fruits of that effort. My boss noticed my dedication and offered me a promotion. I began leading an important project, something that made me feel useful and capable again. Little by little, the sense of loss and pain was replaced by a sense of purpose. I was building something for myself, something that no one could take away. It was during this period that I met Sophie. She wasn't like Kelly, and at first I wasn't sure if I wanted to enter into a relationship again. I was afraid of trusting, afraid of opening up and ending up being betrayed again. But Sophie was patient. She didn't push, didn't try to rush anything. From the beginning, everything between us was simple and honest. We started as friends, going out for coffee, laughing at small things, and gradually that friendship turned into something more. With Sophie, I learned that love didn't have to be complicated, that it didn't need to be a roller coaster of highs and lows. She was kind, fun, and genuinely cared about me. She knew about Kelly, knew about what had happened, and never judged my hesitations. On the contrary, she respected each of them and gave me the space I needed. I remember the first time I told her I loved her. It was a simple moment without grand gestures or declarations, but it was sincere. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie when I turned to her and said, "I love you, Sophie." She smiled, her eyes filling with tears, and hugged me. In that moment, I felt that I was finally leaving the past behind. As my life moved forward, Kelly seemed to fall apart. I heard about her through mutual friends, people who still had some contact or heard news indirectly. After we broke up, her life was never the same again. She tried to move on, tried to start other relationships, but it seemed that no one wanted to stay with her for real. Maybe it was the weight of the wrong choices she made, maybe it was the guilt she carried with her, but the fact was that Kelly ended up alone. Financially, things weren't going well for her either. She lost her job due to impulsive decisions and, without stability, saw her personal projects fail one after another. She even sought help from some friends, but many of them no longer wanted to get involved. More and more, it seemed that life was exacting a high price for all the lies and betrayals she had committed. My brother, on the other hand, managed to move on, though our relationship was never the same again. After that day, there were months of silence between us. I simply couldn't look at him the same way, and the pain of betrayal was an abyss that seemed impossible to cross. But over time, Robert reached out to me again. He apologized more sincerely, acknowledging his mistakes and how much he had hurt me. It wasn't easy, but eventually I accepted his apologies. Not because I had forgotten what he did, but because I didn't want to carry that weight for the rest of my life. Even so, the distance remained. We were no longer the inseparable brothers we once were, but we were cordial. We knew that somehow we needed to coexist, especially for Tony's sake. Robert seemed to have learned from his mistakes. He distanced himself from toxic relationships and focused on being a better father to Tony. And in some way, I respected that. Tony, for his part, grew up and became an incredible man. Despite all the difficulties he faced when he was just a kid, he showed his strength and resilience. That made me immensely proud. He always kept in touch with me, and our conversations, little by little, became lighter and more carefree. Whenever we met, there was that inevitable moment when we laughed about the past, about how chaotic everything had been. "Remember when I said I had seen Kelly before?" Tony would say, laughing. "And how speechless you were?" "Ah, how could I forget?" I would reply, laughing along with him. I think it was the most surreal moment of my life. We laughed because, in the end, we had overcome it. Each of us had found a way to move on, me now married to Sophie, happier than I ever imagined I could be. Tony grown up and building his own life with dreams and plans that I knew he would achieve. And even my brother who, although he had made mistakes, managed to restart and became a better person because of it. As for Kelly, the last I heard of her, she was still alone and trying to find some direction. There was no resentment on my part. I had truly loved her, But that love had turned into a lesson. A lesson about trust, about choices, and about the value of respecting oneself. Kelly made her choices, and now she faced the consequences. I moved on. I left the past where it belonged and allowed myself to live a future that made me happy. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My name is Elias. I'm 24. And the night I came home to find my room stripped bare still feels like a scene burned into my memory. Clothes that had once been folded in drawers were scattered on the damp grass like trash someone forgot to collect. My shoes, books, and even an old guitar I had bought with my first paycheck leaned crooked against the mailbox. And there was my dad standing at the doorway with his arms crossed. His face set in that sharp, stone-carved expression I'd grown up fearing more than I'd ever admit. He didn't yell, didn't rant, didn't even give me one of his long lectures about how I was a disappointment. He just tossed the last box onto the lawn, dusted his hands, and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." Then he turned his back on me like I was a guest who had overstayed my welcome rather than his son. I remember standing there, keys in my hand, looking at the house I grew up in and realizing I wasn't shocked. Not really. Hurt, yes. Humiliated, even more. But not shocked. For years, my dad's approval had been a moving target I could never quite hit. If I worked overtime, he said I was neglecting family. If I studied late, he'd call me lazy for not working more. No matter how carefully I tried to live, he'd always find a way to tilt his head, sigh, and remind me how much better my brother was doing, how much faster my cousin had climbed the ladder, how much more obedient the neighbor's kids seemed. That night was just the culmination of years of small cuts, years of being chipped away piece by piece until there was nothing left of me that fit his definition of a worthy son. It wasn't always this bad. Growing up, I remember my dad being strict. Yes, but not cruel. He was a man who believed in rules and hard work, and I thought that if I followed the script, I'd earn his respect. But somewhere around high school, the comparisons began to sharpen. My younger brother, Caleb, was the golden child. Athletic, charming, the kind of person teachers would gush about at parent-teacher conferences. I was quieter, more bookish, always working part-time jobs to support myself while trying to study. And while my mom tried to soften the blow with little reassurances, she was often silent when Dad tore into me. Her silence, I realized later, was its own kind of betrayal. The first hint that things were slipping beyond repair came the year I turned 19. I had scraped together savings from 2 jobs to buy a used car. Nothing flashy, but mine. The day I pulled into the driveway, proud of finally having something to my name, Dad didn't even look at the car. Instead, he pointed at Caleb, who had been lounging on the porch, and said, "Now that's how you should carry yourself. Confident, easygoing, not uptight like you." Caleb smirked and made some half-hearted joke, and they both laughed. I stood there, keys in hand, feeling like I'd stepped into the wrong script. It wasn't about the car. It was about me never being enough. From then on, things snowballed. Every accomplishment of mine was invisible, swallowed in the shadow of my brother's charm. I paid for most of my college tuition myself, but Dad said I was wasting money on books when I should be learning a trade like a real man. When I came home late from shifts, he'd lock the door and make me sleep in my car because a son who can't respect curfew doesn't deserve a bed. I learned to stop expecting fairness or even basic decency. But still, I stayed because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You grit your teeth, you hold your tongue, you try harder. That's why, standing in front of the house with my life scattered on the lawn, I didn't argue. I didn't beg or defend myself. I just nodded, grabbed my keys, and loaded what I could into my trunk. There was a strange kind of peace in leaving without a word, as though silence was the only power I had left. I drove off into the night, not knowing exactly where I was headed, but certain of one thing. I wasn't coming back. Not like this. But as the weeks turned into months, and the months into 8 long stretches of rebuilding my life piece by piece, something shifted. I worked harder than ever, not for Dad's approval this time, but for myself. I carved out a life that didn't depend on his nod or his rare, begrudging praise. I stayed quiet, didn't reach out, didn't explain where I went or how I was doing. And for a long while there was silence from him, too. Until one day, my phone lit up with the first of many messages. Then dozens more until it reached 72 in total. Each one more desperate than the last. Each one ending with the same plea, "Please come back." That's when I realized the story wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't answer the messages at first. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room every time it buzzed with another, "Please come back," or "We miss you." But another part of me, the scarred, younger version of myself that had always craved approval, read every word, turning them over like sharp stones in my hand. Because when I looked closer, I noticed something. Those messages weren't just apologies. They weren't even real apologies. They were carefully worded hooks, the kind my dad had used my whole life. "Please come back. Your mother is worried. We miss you. The family's not the same without you. Stop punishing us for one mistake." The same old script. He wasn't saying, "I'm sorry I threw you out." He was saying, "Look at what you're doing to us." And that was when I felt the familiar knot of manipulation tightening again. To understand why those messages cut so deep, I need to go back to those months before I left when the favoritism in my family had become so blatant. It was almost theatrical. My brother Caleb wasn't just the favorite. He was the family's investment. Dad poured money into his hobbies, his car, his half-hearted business ideas. If Caleb wanted something, Dad found a way. But when I asked for help once, just once, with tuition after my hours at work got cut, Dad laughed in my face. He said, "If you can't pay for it yourself, maybe it's not worth studying." A week later, Caleb announced he was going on a trip to Miami with friends, and Dad handed him an envelope of cash like it was a rite of passage. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they spoke about us when we weren't in the room. Once I overheard Dad telling a neighbor, "Caleb, now he's got potential. Elias, he means well, but he'll never be more than average." I remember standing behind the door, my hands trembling, realizing that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I'd never escape that label in his eyes. And when I confronted him about it later, his response was simple. "If you don't like what I say, prove me wrong." That phrase haunted me. Prove me wrong. But whenever I tried, he moved the finish line farther away. The last holiday I spent at home before everything exploded made it painfully clear. It was Christmas Eve and I'd saved up to buy gifts for everyone, even Dad. I'd spend hours picking out things they'd actually use, things I thought would make them feel cared for. When it came time to exchange, Caleb's gift, a cheap cologne set he'd grabbed last minute, was met with applause, laughter, even a toast to his thoughtfulness. Mine? Dad barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Later that night, when I asked if he liked it, he shrugged and said, "It's fine. You could have saved your money." Those words stuck in my throat like gravel. So, when I saw those 72 messages lighting up my phone months later, I couldn't help but hear the echo of all those moments. The manipulation was familiar, rehearsed. He wasn't reaching out to me as his son. He was reaching out because something in his world had shifted and he needed me back to balance it. Maybe Caleb had disappointed him. Maybe the image of the perfect family had cracked. Whatever it wasn't about love. It was about control. I still remember the first time he tried calling instead of texting. My phone buzzed on the table, his name flashing across the screen, and I just sat there staring. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, sounded thinner this time. "Elias," he said, "we need to talk. Don't be stubborn. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just come home and we'll sort things out. Caleb misses you too." And there it was again. That subtle twist. Not "I miss you," but "you're being stubborn." Not "we were wrong," but "you're making it harder." The same script, different stage. And yet, despite knowing all of this, I felt the tension inside me rising. Because while I had started building a life of my own, tiny apartment, steady job, quiet routines, I still carried the weight of those years on my back. I wondered if ignoring him made me as cruel as he had been. I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this time he meant it. But deep down, I knew better. I knew what was waiting for me if I walked back through that door. The favoritism, the cutting remarks, the the constant reshaping of my worth into something I could never meet. And I knew something else, too. The more desperate he became, the more unreasonable he would get. And I had no idea just how far he was willing to go to pull me back under his control. That realization hit me hardest the night my mom finally sent me a message of her own. One that made my chest tighten in a way Dad's never could. The message from my mom came late, just after midnight. I was lying on the couch in my apartment, half asleep with the TV buzzing low in the background when my phone lit up. For a second, I thought it was another one of Dad's relentless texts. But when I saw it was from Mom, my heart gave that strange, uneasy jolt. Her message was short, almost too short. "Elias, we need to talk. Your father made a decision about your things. Call me tomorrow." My things. I sat up straight, wide awake now, dread washing over me. I had thought everything was already gone. The clothes tossed on the lawn. The books and guitar I'd salvaged. The few boxes I had squeezed into the trunk of my car. What else could she mean? I called her immediately, but she didn't pick up. The next morning I tried again. That time she answered. Her voice was tight, almost whispery, like she was afraid someone might overhear. "Elias," she said. "Your father, he sold the rest of your stuff. The boxes you left in the garage, the computer, your old files, even the desk you bought when you started school. He said you weren't coming back, so there was no point keeping it." I felt my chest cave in. My computer, years of work, photos, writings, everything gone. I had saved it in the garage because I thought maybe, just maybe, when things cooled down I could come back for it. And my dad had just erased it all in a single calculated move. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Her answer came after a long pause. "You know how he is, Elias. Once he makes up his mind, there's no changing it." I didn't want to make things worse. I closed my eyes, feeling that old familiar anger, the kind that made my hands shake. Because this wasn't just about property. This wasn't about old furniture or boxes. It was about years of my life, memories, achievements, records, all treated like garbage. And hearing my mom excuse it yet again twisted the knife even deeper. She had always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper. But peacekeeping, I realized, was just another word for abandoning me when it counted most. Later that day, I confirmed it for myself. My cousin, who lived down the street, sent me a photo he'd taken of a yard sale sign in front of our house. Tables covered in random items. My old textbooks, framed photos, even the chess set my grandfather had given me before he passed. The caption underneath read, "Your dad's clearinghouse. Thought you should know." I don't know how long I sat staring at that photo, but when I finally looked away, something in me had changed. Up until then, I had carried a fragile thread of hope that maybe things weren't completely broken, that maybe if I stayed away long enough, they would learn to value me. But watching strangers walk away with pieces of my life was the moment the thread snapped. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was betrayal. It was deliberate, personal. That night, Dad sent another message. This one was longer than the usual one-liners. "You're being dramatic. Those things were just clutter and you weren't here to take care of them. Caleb's moving into your old room and we need the space. It's time you stopped acting like the victim and grew up." I read it twice, my vision blurring with anger. He hadn't just erased me from the house. He had replaced me. My brother, the golden child, was now sleeping in the room I had spent years calling mine, surrounded by the scraps of what was once my life. My dad hadn't just thrown me out. He had rewritten the script so I'd never existed there in the first place. I wanted to scream, to call him, to unload everything I had bottled up over the years. But I didn't. Because beneath the anger, something colder was beginning to form. A resolve I'd never felt before. If my father thought he could erase me so easily, he was wrong. He could sell my desk, my books, my photos, but he couldn't take away the life I was building outside his walls. And for the first time, I wasn't just going to survive his cruelty. I was going to make him regret it. But before that moment of clarity came the hardest blow yet. The one that made me realize how much lower they were willing to go. And it arrived in the form of another message, this time from Caleb himself. Caleb's message came on a Sunday afternoon when I was finally settling into the rhythm of my own life. I had just gotten home from a double shift, the kind of day that left me bone-tired but strangely satisfied. Because unlike before, every dollar I earned was mine. Every small success belonged to me. I remember making a cup of cheap instant coffee, sinking into my couch, and then hearing the chime of my phone. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. But when I saw his name on the screen, I couldn't resist. The message was short, smug. "Thanks for the room, bro. Finally fixed it up the way it should have been." "Don't worry," I tossed the old junk. "Place looks great now." I sat there staring at the screen, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. It wasn't just the words. It was the casual arrogance, the way he twisted the knife without even trying to hide it. My brother, the one who had always coasted on charm and favoritism, was now living in the room I had been thrown out of, surrounded by the ashes of my past. My old posters, the shelves I built by hand, the small things I had collected to make that space mine, they were gone. And now he was rubbing it in my face like I had been some temporary tenant who finally made way for the rightful heir. I didn't reply, couldn't. My hands shook too much to type. Instead, I scrolled through his social media later that night, something I had avoided since leaving home. And there it was, photo after photo of Caleb standing in what used to be my room. He had painted the walls a new color, rearranged everything, and filled it with sleek furniture Dad had obviously paid for. In one post, the caption read, "Finally got the upgrade I deserve." In another, someone commented, "Isn't that your brother's old room?" Caleb's reply was a smirking emoji followed by, "Not anymore." That was the moment I hit rock bottom. It wasn't just that I had lost my home. It was that I had lost my place in the family entirely. They weren't waiting for me to come back. They weren't missing me. They had erased me, painted over my existence, and handed it all to Caleb with a bow on top. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional honk from the street outside. The loneliness pressed down on me, heavier than ever. For years, I had endured mistreatment because I still clung to the hope that I mattered to them. That one day, if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, they'd see me differently. But now I understood I had never been the son they wanted. I had only been a placeholder until Caleb took center stage. The next few weeks blurred together. I went to work, came home, ate, and repeated the cycle. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't go out, didn't answer texts from the few friends who still checked in. I told myself I was too busy, too tired. But the truth was, I didn't know who I was outside of the constant battle for my family's approval. And without them in the picture, I felt hollow. But even in that emptiness, a quiet resolve began to take root. The kind that doesn't announce itself with grand speeches or sudden decisions. It was subtle, like embers glowing under ash. I started saving more aggressively, cutting out every unnecessary expense. I took on extra shifts, even when my body screamed for rest. And slowly, I began to piece together a plan. Not revenge, at least not yet. Just survival, just the simple determination to stand on my own so that when the time came, I would no longer need anything from them. In those silent nights, when the weight of everything felt unbearable, I made myself a promise. I would never again beg for a place in a family that had thrown me out. I would build a life so steady, so untouchable that they could never take it away from me. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the memories of my dad's voice telling me I'd never amount to anything echoed so loudly. I almost believed him. But I kept moving step by step, shift by shift. And while I didn't realize it at the time, every small act of survival was also an act of quiet defiance. Still, I didn't know that my father's grip on control was loosening, and his desperation was only beginning to show. And when his desperation finally collided with the fragile life I was building, everything shifted. The first flicker of change came in the most unexpected way. I had been working at a logistics company as a warehouse assistant, stacking boxes and managing inventory. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady and it paid my bills. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside after a long shift and said, "Elias, you've got an eye for detail. You ever thought about moving up into operations? I didn't know how to answer at first. Me? The one who had been told his whole life he was average at best? But she was serious. She told me a supervisor position was opening, and while it meant longer hours, it also came with better pay, benefits, and a chance to grow. For the first time in years, someone saw value in me. Not because of Caleb's shadow, not because of Dad's impossible standards, but because of me. I took the job. The first few weeks were tough. Learning schedules, managing people, making quick decisions under pressure. But something surprising happened. I thrived. I found myself solving problems on the fly, coordinating shipments, and even earning the respect of workers twice my age. For once, I wasn't the overlooked one. I wasn't less than. I was the one people turned to when things got complicated. The pay raise meant I could finally move out of the cramped studio apartment. I found a modest one-bedroom across town. Nothing fancy, but when I walked through the door with the keys in my hand, it felt like the world's quietest victory. No one had handed it to me. No one could take it away. It was mine. With the stability came confidence. I reconnected with old friends I'd pushed away during my lowest point. I stopped dodging their calls and started showing up again. Grabbing coffee, laughing, remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere. And slowly, the emptiness I had carried since leaving home began to feel less suffocating. At work, I pushed myself further. I signed up for training courses, learned more about supply chains and logistics systems. Before long, I was the one proposing solutions in meetings, and people actually listened. My manager, impressed with my progress, started hinting at more opportunities down the line. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like a wall closing in. Felt wide open. And then, almost by accident, I stumbled into something bigger. A client company I had worked with regularly needed extra help coordinating a major shipment. I stayed late, worked through the night, and made sure everything ran smoothly. The head of their team noticed, and after a brief conversation, they offered me a position with their firm. Better salary, better growth, more independence. It felt surreal, like doors were swinging open faster than I could walk through them. Within a year, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I had savings in the bank, a reliable car, and the kind of independence I had only dreamed of. The voice of my father telling me I'd never amount to anything grew quieter each day, replaced by the steady hum of progress. And yet, even as I built this new life, their presence lingered. Dad's texts hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown more frequent and desperate. It's been long enough. Stop holding a grudge. Your brother asks about you. Each one dripped with the same mix of manipulation and entitlement, as if my silence was the real betrayal. But here's the thing. I didn't need him anymore. For the first time, I held the power. I had proven him wrong. Not by shouting back, not by begging for recognition, but by living a life without him. And that power, the quiet, steady kind, was intoxicating. It wasn't just about money or independence. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't at the mercy of my father's approval. I could choose when to answer, when to ignore, when to walk away. And deep down, I began to wonder what it would look like to flip the script entirely, to let him see what he had lost. That thought grew stronger with every unanswered message, every voicemail deleted. And it grew even stronger the day I saw my brother Caleb's name appear on my phone again. This time, not to gloat, but to ask for help. It was a Tuesday evening when Caleb's name lit up my phone again. But this time, there was no smug caption attached, no photo of him flaunting my old room. Instead, it was a plain text. Can we talk? It's important. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of trick, another jab meant to drag me back into the cycle of comparison and humiliation. But something about the wording felt different, urgent, hesitant. Against my better judgment, I replied with a single word, "Why?" His answer came quickly. "Things aren't going well here. Dad's been different. Can we meet?" I almost laughed. The same brother who had paraded through my old space like it was a prize, who had never once defended me when Dad tore me down, was now reaching out. But curiosity got the better of me. A week later, I agreed to meet him at a quiet coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, I hardly recognized him. Caleb, who had always carried himself with that effortless swagger, looked worn down. His clothes were as stylish as ever, but his posture was slumped. His eyes heavy with something I had never seen on him before: fear. He didn't waste time. "Elias," he said, leaning forward, "Dad's in trouble. The business, it's collapsing. He made some bad investments. He's been borrowing money left and right, and now people are asking questions." I let the words sink in. Dad, the man who had mocked me for being average, who had worshipped success like a religion, was failing. The same father who had sold my belongings without a second thought, who had erased me from his home, was now watching his empire crumble. "And?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "He's desperate. He keeps saying if you came back, it would fix things. That you'd help out, maybe take on some of the debt. He thinks you've been saving, maybe earning more than you let on." There it was. The real reason behind those 72 messages. The desperate voicemails, the sudden, almost pleading tone. It had nothing to do with missing me, nothing to do with family. It was about money. It was about control. He had thrown me out when I was of no use to him, and now that his foundation was cracking, he wanted me back as a pillar to hold it up. I didn't answer right away. I let Caleb keep talking. He told me about arguments at home, about Dad snapping at Mom over small things, about the tension that filled the house like smoke. Caleb confessed he was scared, that he had relied too heavily on Dad's support and now found himself cornered. It was strange listening to him. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless one. I wasn't the one begging to be heard. Caleb, my father's golden child, was sitting across from me, practically wringing his hands, while I sat calm, steady, untouched by the storm tearing through their lives. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had leverage, not just over Caleb, but over Dad himself. The years of humiliation, the dismissal, the betrayal, it had all flipped. They needed me now, and I didn't need them. That was power, quiet, deliberate, undeniable power. When I left the coffee shop, Caleb tried one last time. "Think about it," he said. "Dad keeps saying family has to stick together. He'll forgive everything if you just come back." I smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but out of the bitter irony of it all. Dad wasn't offering forgiveness. He was begging for mine, though he'd never admit it. And that gave me the upper hand in a way I never imagined I'd have. As I walked back to my car, the plan began to form. Not fully, not yet, but the outline of something sharp and satisfying. I wasn't going to be the desperate son standing in the rain outside my own house anymore. This time, I was going to decide how the story ended. And when I finally checked my phone that night, there it was again. Another message from Dad. This one longer than usual. "Elias, come home. We need you. I made mistakes, but we're still family. You're still my son." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pull of those words. I felt something else entirely. A calm certainty that the tables had turned. I didn't respond to Dad's message right away. Instead, I let it sit there, glowing on my phone like a beacon of irony. For years, I had begged for a fraction of his attention, a crumb of recognition. Now, he was the one reaching out, and I was the one deciding whether his words had any weight at all. The balance of power had shifted, and I wasn't about to waste the moment. The first step was patience. Revenge, real revenge, wasn't about shouting or slamming doors. It was about silence, about making them stew in the consequences of their own choices. So I ignored him. Days passed, then weeks. The messages grew more frantic, more emotional. "I know I was hard on you. You can't hold this grudge forever. Don't punish the family for my mistakes." It was the same script he had always used, but now I was no longer a captive audience. Then came the opportunity one had been waiting for. Through Caleb's scattered updates and a few well-placed questions to people I still knew in town, I learned that Dad's financial troubles were worse than he let on. The small, contracting business he had run for decades was teetering on bankruptcy. Word was spreading fast. Clients pulling out, suppliers demanding payment, debts piling high. And the more desperate he became, the more he tried to hide it, clinging to his pride like it was the last piece of wood in a sinking ship. That's when I decided to act. I had been saving diligently, investing cautiously, and with my new job and steady promotions, I had quietly built a financial cushion. Not millions, but enough to matter. Enough to show I had done what Dad always swore I couldn't: create stability on my own. And now I would use it, not to bail him out, but to expose the lie he had been living. The next time Caleb reached out, I agreed to meet him again. This time I was different, calmer, sharper, carrying myself with the kind of quiet authority that comes when you know you're the one holding the cards. We sat across from each other, and before he could start pleading on Dad's behalf, I laid it out. "Caleb," I said, "you wanted me to come back to help, but you need to understand something. I'm not the same person who walked out of that house 8 months ago. I don't owe Dad anything. Not after he threw me out, sold my things, erased me. If I do anything, it won't be for him. It will be for me." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of what I meant. So I leaned in. "I know about the debts. I know the business is failing, and I know Dad's been telling people he can fix it if I come back. But here's the truth. I could help. I could write a check today and stabilize everything. And I'm not going to." The look on Caleb's face was almost enough on its own. Shock, fear, a flash of recognition that the brother he had dismissed for years was now the one in control. "But here's what I will do," I continued. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. That Dad's not the invincible man he pretends to be. That he gambled everything away and lost. And when people ask why I didn't step in, I'll tell them. Because when I needed him, he tossed me onto the lawn like garbage." Caleb tried to interrupt, stammering something about family and forgiveness, but I cut him off. "No, family isn't something you erase when it's inconvenient. Family isn't something you sell at a yard sale. Dad made his choice. Now he can live with it." I walked out before he could respond, the weight of years of humiliation finally lifting with each step. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. And that night, when Dad called again, I finally answered. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke with the calmness of someone who had already won. "You always told me to prove you wrong," I said. "Well, I did. I built a life without you. And now, when you need me most, I'm proving something else. You can't erase me and then come crawling back when it's convenient. You made your choice. This is mine." Then I hung up. The silence that followed was more powerful than any argument we had ever had. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless son trying to earn his place. I was the one closing the door. But revenge has a way of rippling out farther than you expect. And what happened next in the family, the fallout I hadn't even planned, was more devastating than anything I could have orchestrated myself. When I hung up that night, I thought the story was finished, that my silence and refusal were the final word. But what I didn't realize was that my father's world was already crumbling, and my choice not to save him didn't just seal his fate. It accelerated it. Within weeks, the news began to spread. The business, the one he had paraded around town as the symbol of his hard work and dominance, folded. Clients who had once praised him cut ties overnight. Suppliers came knocking for unpaid bills. And when they realized there was no money, lawsuits followed. The man who had always strutted around with his chin high, who mocked me for being weak, was now the subject of whispers and pity. In a small town, reputation is everything, and his had shattered. Caleb tried to keep up appearances, but it wasn't long before cracks showed. Without Dad's financial support, he was exposed. The flashy clothes, the trips, the arrogance. All of it had been built on Dad's wallet. He called me again, this time not with smugness, but desperation. "Elias, please," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't understand. We're drowning here." And for the first time, I understood perfectly. This was the same brother who had mocked me from my old room, who had basked in being the golden child. Now he was realizing that the pedestal he had been placed on was crumbling beneath him. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply told him, "You'll figure it out the way I had to." And then I hung up. My mother, who had always been the quiet mediator, finally reached out, too. Her message was different, less demanding, more sorrowful. "I should have done more," she admitted. "I should have stopped him." I didn't reply. I couldn't because no matter how much she claimed regret, her silence during all those years had been its own kind of betrayal. And while part of me still loved her, I couldn't carry her guilt, too. As for Dad, his final message came on a Sunday morning, the same day I moved into a new apartment. Bigger, brighter, paid for entirely by me. It wasn't long, just a single line. I was wrong. I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight, memories flooding back of every insult, every dismissal, every time he had told me I'd never be enough. And now here it was, an admission too late to matter. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. His silence after that message was louder than anything he could have said. Months passed, and I heard through the grapevine that he had sold the house. The same house he had thrown me out of. The same lawn where my belongings had been scattered like trash. He downsized into a small rental on the edge of town. A shadow of the man who once towered over everyone. People no longer respected him. They pitied him. And in many ways, that was worse for him than anything I could have done. I, on the other hand, kept rising. Promotions, opportunities, friendships rebuilt. My life was no longer defined by his approval or his rejection. I had carved out my own space in the world, one that no one could take away. One evening, after another long day at work, I drove past the old house. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard, the paint peeling from the shutters, the once manicured lawn overgrown. I pulled over for just a moment, staring at the place that had once been both my prison and my proving ground. And then, without a word, I drove away. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in peace. Because for the first time I understood, revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about walking away whole while he crumbled under the weight of his own choices. And I had done just that. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name is Cole. I'm 28 years old and, until about 6 months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood just outside of San Diego in a house with white siding and a porch swing that squeaked when you rocked too hard. To the world, we looked like a normal, happy family. 2 parents, 2 sons, and a golden retriever named Dusty. But behind the neat curtains and smiling Christmas cards, things were always a little off. I was adopted when I was 2. My parents, Dennis and Linda, had been trying to conceive for years without success. Their miracle baby, my younger brother, Ryan, came along 3 years later. And from the moment he was born, the energy in the house shifted. At first, it was subtle. Extra photos of Ryan on the fridge, more of his drawings on the walls. Then it became obvious. He got the bigger room even though I was older. He got the new clothes, the better bike, the louder birthday parties. I was always told I was special for being adopted, but their actions said otherwise. I tried not to let it get to me. I worked hard in school, stayed out of trouble, and got into a good college on scholarship. My parents didn't contribute a dime. They said they couldn't afford it, even though I knew they had just renovated their kitchen and paid for Ryan's private pitching coach. Still, I didn't resent them, not fully. I figured maybe that's just how it goes sometimes. Maybe it wasn't personal. Ryan, though, he made it personal. He never let me forget that I was the outsider, the bonus kid. At family dinners, he'd crack jokes like, "Cole's just the trial run," and my parents would chuckle instead of shutting it down. At 16, he once looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're lucky they even kept you." I remember that night vividly. I had gone upstairs and stared at the ceiling until morning, wondering if maybe I was just a guest in my own home. Fast forward a decade. I moved to Seattle after college, got a job in tech, worked my way up, and eventually started my own consulting firm. It wasn't flashy at first, but I poured everything I had into it. While Ryan was posting shirtless selfies on Instagram and failing out of community college, I was building something. I never expected help from my family, and they never offered it. We kept in touch out of obligation, holiday calls, occasional texts, but the distance between us felt like an unspoken agreement. Last year, my parents' health started to decline. My dad had a minor stroke, and my mom was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. I flew down multiple times, helped where I could, arranged appointments, and made sure their insurance covered everything. Ryan, of course, didn't lift a finger, but he was always there for the photo ops. smiling bedside pictures with captions like, "Cherish every moment." I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself it wasn't about recognition. Then came the will. It was a sunny day in March when I got the email from the estate attorney asking me to be present for the reading. I took the next flight down. We gathered in the office of a man named Mr. Wilcox, a tired-looking lawyer with a balding head and coffee stains on his collar. Ryan walked in late, wearing sunglasses indoors and reeking of whatever cologne influencers bathe in these days. My parents weren't there. They had passed 3 weeks apart, my mom first, then my dad shortly after. It still hadn't fully sunk in. Mr. Wilcox opened the folder, cleared his throat, and began reading. "To our son Ryan," he said, "we leave the house, the vehicles, and the remainder of our savings, totaling $740,000. I sat still, waiting. "To Cole," Mr. Wilcox continued, "we leave our best wishes." That was it. No keepsake, no letter, not even a photo album. Ryan grinned like he'd won the lottery. "Guess they finally admitted who the real son is," he said with zero shame. "Face it, man. You were never really family." I didn't respond. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. I stood up, thanked Mr. Wilcox for his time, and walked out without another word. Outside, I sat in my rental car and just stared ahead. I don't know how long I stayed there. My hands were shaking, not from rage, but from something deeper, something cold, like a final lock clicking shut on a door I'd been trying to open my whole life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove to the airport and flew home. 3 days later, I got a call from a woman named Diane. She said she was with Worthington and Blay, a law firm in Manhattan, and that she had urgent news regarding an estate. I assumed it was some kind of mistake, but she asked for me by full name, including the middle name only my birth certificate listed, one I never used. That night, I sat on my couch, barely breathing. As Diane explained that my biological parents, George and Ava Lennox, had passed away in a private plane crash 2 weeks earlier. I didn't know them. I'd never met them. But apparently, they'd been keeping quiet tabs on me all these years. They were wealthy, reclusive entrepreneurs who had built and sold multiple companies in pharmaceuticals and clean tech. They had no other children, no living relatives. They left everything to me. The estate included several properties. One in Napa Valley, another in the Hamptons, and a brownstone in New York. A trust fund, stocks, patents, royalties. The total value, north of $42 million. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at my blank TV screen as the numbers echoed in my ears. I thought I'd feel shock or disbelief or joy, but instead, I felt something heavier, vindication and sadness. So much sadness for the parents I never knew, for the ones I thought I had, and for the little boy who'd once prayed they'd love him like they did their real son. I flew to New York the next week. The estate manager showed me everything. The brownstone, the records, even a lockbox with handwritten letters. They'd written to me every year on my birthday, but never sent them. I spent 3 days reading them, crying quietly in a room filled with people I never got to know. They had wanted me. They had loved me from afar, silently but fiercely, and now they were gone, too. I kept it all quiet. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't tell anyone from my former life. I moved into the brownstone, set up a foundation in their name, and spent my days planning what to do with a future I never imagined I'd have. That is, until Ryan showed up at my doorstep, looking desperate, muttering something about bad investments and needing a place to stay. I opened the gate, stepped out just far enough for him to see me, and said the first words I'd spoken to him in over a year. He blinked when he saw me. "Cole?" he asked, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. I didn't say anything at first, just looked at him. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way, the kind of weight loss that comes from stress and too many sleepless nights. His once perfect haircut had grown shaggy, and his clothes, designer, sure, were wrinkled and a little too worn around the cuffs. He looked like a man trying to wear the last pieces of a life that didn't fit him anymore. "Man," he said, forcing a laugh, "I didn't even know you lived here. I saw the place online when I was looking for rentals and thought, no way this is Cole's." But then the gate opened and He trailed off, glancing around at the pristine front garden, the black wrought iron fencing, and the polished brass plate with the Linux name. I stayed quiet, letting him talk himself into knots. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I didn't come to fight, he said finally. Things haven't been great lately. I made some investments that didn't pan out. Got burned on a crypto deal and the house, Mom and Dad's place. I had to sell it. The market tanked and I'm underwater on some debts. I thought maybe we could talk. I crossed my arms. Talk about what, exactly? He hesitated. Look, I know things got weird after the will. I was just caught off guard, man. I didn't mean all that stuff I said. You didn't mean it? I repeated, not raising my voice, not even moving. You've been saying things like that since we were kids, Ryan. The only difference is now you're broke and you think I forgot. He shifted uncomfortably. That's not fair. What's not fair, I cut in, is growing up in a house where your parents let you believe you were better because of DNA. What's not fair is giving everything to a son who did nothing but take, and leaving nothing for the one who actually showed up when it counted. He looked down, jaw clenched. So, this is revenge then? You're going to leave your brother out in the cold? I smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in it. You're not my brother. You made that real clear. Ryan stepped forward. Okay, look, I messed up. I know that. But you've got money now. You can help. I'm not asking for a handout, just a place to stay. Just until I get back on my feet. That's when it hit me. He didn't know. Not really. He didn't know the full picture. I don't know if he thought I won the lottery or sold a startup or something, but he had no idea where the money came from or what it represented. So I asked, do you know who lived here before me? He shook his head. My biological parents, I said slowly. This was their home. They passed away in a crash a few weeks after Mom and Dad passed. Turns out they've been watching from a distance my whole life. And they left everything to me. Millions, properties, stocks, a foundation. You know what else they left? Letters. Dozens of them. They wrote to me every year. They loved me from afar, even if they never got the chance to say it in person. Ryan stared at me like he was trying to do the math, trying to process what I just told him. You're saying they were rich? I'm saying, I replied, that I finally found out what it's like to be wanted, to be chosen, not out of convenience, not out of pressure, but out of love. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, mouth half open like someone had unplugged the batteries mid-sentence. And then, with all the grace of a drowning man, he tried again. I'm sorry, Cole. Seriously. I was a jerk growing up. I was jealous. I guess you always seemed so together. You didn't need anyone. And I don't know. I guess I thought if I pushed you out, I'd feel more like the favorite. You were the favorite, I said simply. But I don't think it made you happy. Did it? He looked away. I could have ended it there. Shut the gate, turned around, and walked back into the warmth of the life I was finally building for myself. But something in me paused. Not out of sympathy. Not even pity. Just closure. Wait here, I said. I walked back inside, down the hallway lined with framed sketches my birth mother had drawn. Landscapes, wildflowers, silhouettes of me as a toddler she must have imagined from memory. I opened a drawer in the study and pulled out a single envelope. Inside was a photocopy of the original Lennox will and a letter from their attorney verifying the transfer of assets. I brought it back and handed it through the gate. Ryan opened it with shaky fingers, eyes scanning the document. And when he reached the bottom, his face went pale. This isn't real, he whispered. It's very real. He clutched the paper, then looked up at me, suddenly furious. So what? You're just going to stand there on your throne and watch me drown? I didn't flinch. I watched you swim while I sank for most of my life. I think you'll manage. His lips curled, but he didn't say anything else. He just stood there for a long moment, then slowly turned and walked away, the papers fluttering slightly in the wind. I watched until he reached the sidewalk, until the street swallowed him up. And just when I turned to go back inside, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. When I recognized the New Mexico area code, The voice on the other end was calm, careful, and what they said next changed everything. The voice on the line was female, soft-spoken but steady. "Is this Cole Lennox?" My throat tightened. "Yes." "Who is this?" There was a pause. "My name is Elena. I was your biological mother's attorney, Ava Lennox. I'm calling you because something came up. Something not included in the original estate package." I closed the door behind me slowly, the sound of it shutting echoing through the entry hall like the thud of a gavel. I thought I already had everything. The properties, the accounts, the letters. "Yes, those were all part of the formal estate," Elena said. "But there were safeguards. Ava and George were very particular about privacy and legacy. There were things they didn't even want disclosed in their wills. But per Ava's instructions, I was to contact you if, and only if, you were approached by your adoptive family after the inheritance was transferred." I blinked, confused. "You mean they knew this would happen?" "I wouldn't say they knew, but they expected it. Ava had an instinct about people. She figured that once the dust settled and certain people realized you were no longer the wallet with a pulse, as she put it, they'd come crawling." I almost laughed, but it got caught somewhere in my chest. "So, what exactly am I being contacted for?" "She left you something else," Elena said. "Something private, not to be handled by the estate firm. She didn't want it in legal hands or on any paper trail. I have it in a lockbox in my personal office in Santa Fe." "What is it?" "I think you should come see for yourself," she said. "I can have it ready by tomorrow. There's also someone you need to meet." Ava's wishes were very specific about that, too. I sat down slowly on the leather couch, heart thudding in a strange rhythm. "Who am I meeting?" Another pause. This one longer. "Elena," I prompted. She sighed. "Her name is Maria, and she's your sister." I froze. The room went still. "No," I said. "No, that's not possible. I was told I was their only child." "That's what the will said," she replied gently. "Because legally you were." Maria's existence was complicated. Ava gave birth to her when she was just 19 before she ever met George. It was a closed adoption. She spent years trying to track her down and didn't find her until shortly before you turned 25. By then, Maria was married, had children of her own, and didn't want her life disrupted. "And now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Now things have changed." Maria reached out just days after Ava passed. She wanted to talk. "She's ready." I stood up without realizing it, pacing in front of the massive bay windows that looked out over the Lennox courtyard. "So what? You're telling me I have a sister I've never met who's just now coming out of the woodwork right after I inherit millions?" "I understand how that sounds," Elena said. "But Maria doesn't want money. In fact, she made it very clear she doesn't care about the inheritance. She just wants to talk. And Ava wanted the two of you to meet. She wrote that if anything were to happen to her, you should be given a letter, one that explains everything." I let the silence linger for a beat before I said, "Text me your address. I'll be on a flight by morning." The next day felt surreal. I barely slept, replaying every word from that call in my head. A sister, a whole other branch of my life tucked away in the shadows like an unopened chapter. I had always assumed my biological parents were childless before me, that their decision to give me up was a one-time heartbreak. But now I had to confront something stranger. I wasn't alone in the way I thought I was. When I arrived at the law office in Santa Fe, a sandstone building nestled in the hills outside the city, Elena was already waiting in the front lobby. She was in her late 50s with kind eyes and a quiet, perceptive demeanor. She didn't waste time with small talk. "She's in the back," Elena said. "But before you see her, Ava asked that I give you this." She handed me a thick envelope, yellowed with time and sealed with red wax. My name was written in Ava's handwriting, careful, even, and unmistakably maternal. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. The letter was long, 7 pages, handwritten. Ava told me about her life before George, about Maria's birth, and about how young and scared she was when she made the decision to give her up. She described the pain, the regret, and the years she spent searching. She spoke about how finding me later in life had been a miracle, one she never thought she deserved. She explained why she never tried to reach out directly. I didn't want to disrupt the life you were building, but we watched from a distance. Every birthday, every graduation, we were proud of you. I had to stop reading twice just to breathe. My eyes were burning and I couldn't stop the quiet shaking in my hands. She ended the letter with a simple request. Meet your sister. Not because I asked it, but because you deserve to know you were never alone. Not really. And neither was she. I wiped my face, folded the letter carefully, and nodded to Elena. I'm ready. She led me down the hallway to a private conference room. The door opened slowly and inside stood a woman maybe 6 years older than me. Her dark hair was pinned up, her eyes tired but warm. She looked up when I walked in and we just stared at each other for a moment. No one moved. Then she gave me a sad smile and said, So, you're Cole. I nodded. And you're Maria? She looked like she wanted to say something else, but just then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowned, and turned it face down without answering. I'm sorry, she said. It's been a weird week. I almost didn't come, but I wanted to meet you. I needed to meet you. I sat down across from her. Did you know about me? Not until about a year ago, she said. Ava sent a letter. Said she didn't expect anything, just that she wanted me to know she had another child. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready. Then, after the plane crash, I guess I realized time's not something you can buy more of. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all still sinking in. So, where does that leave us? Maria looked me dead in the eye. That's what I want to figure out. But there's something else. Something you should probably know before we go any further. I leaned in, heart starting to pick up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. Faded, old, with worn corners. She slid it across the table. And when I saw who was standing in the background of that photo, behind Ava, behind Maria, I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Because I recognized him. I stared at the photograph, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. It was grainy, clearly taken decades ago, but the face in the background was unmistakable. Cropped near the edge, arms crossed and partially turned away, was Dennis, the man I'd called Dad my entire life. The same Dennis who used to tuck me in when I was little. The same man who once taught me to tie my shoelaces, who took me on bike rides, who later signed a will leaving me nothing. Maria saw the recognition in my face before I said a word. So, she said, her voice low, you see it too? I looked up slowly. Why was he there? Maria sighed, folded her hands and leaned forward. That photo was taken in Albuquerque, 1994, about a year before you were adopted. Ava didn't know it was taken. Someone else in her circle snapped it at a dinner party. When she found it years later, she almost threw it away. She thought she was seeing things, but it was him, Dennis. She never figured out why he was there or how he was connected to anyone in that room. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to process what that meant. Are you saying my adoptive father knew Ava? We don't know how well, Maria said. But yeah, that's what Ava suspected. After she found the photo, she went digging. She found out Dennis used to work for a pharmaceutical company in New Mexico in the early 90s, the same company Ava consulted for before she built her own firm. Their paths crossed more than once. Wait, I said, sitting up straighter. Are you saying the adoption wasn't random? That he knew who I was? Maria hesitated. That's exactly what I'm saying. Ava was convinced it wasn't a coincidence. But by the time she realized it, it was too late. You were already with Dennis and Linda. She tried to reach out, but they cut off all communication. It's why she and George moved their operations east and disappeared from public view. She didn't want to risk your life being upended. My pulse thudded in my ears. All my life, I thought Dennis and Linda had just happened upon me, that I'd been placed into their arms by chance or providence. But now, this changed everything. It meant Dennis had chosen me, but not out of kindness, out of control. Why wouldn't they just tell me? I asked, voice cracking a little. Why would they go through all that and then treat me like an outsider? Maria's face softened. Ava wondered the same thing. But you said they never treated you like you were really theirs, right? Yeah, I said bitterly. They reminded me of that every day. Maybe that's the thing, she said. Maybe Dennis wanted to keep you not because he loved you, but because he wanted to hurt Ava. I stared at her. You're saying I was a pawn? She nodded slowly. Or leverage. Or revenge. Ava never figured it out completely, but she carried the guilt for years, that she lost you to them. I didn't know what to say. I felt like my brain was trying to rewrite my whole life, page by page, as I sat there. Maria reached over and placed a hand on mine. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I just think you deserve the truth. Ava didn't want to leave this world with secrets, and I think she hoped we'd find each other, even if it was late. I squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. A piece clicking into place. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. I needed to hear it, even if it hurts. We talked for hours after that. She showed me more letters Ava had sent her, shared photos, told me about her kids, her life, her regrets. And I told her mine. The broken holidays, the fake smiles, the loneliness. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to someone. She just got it. Eventually, she asked the question I didn't expect. So, what are you going to do about Ryan? I exhaled slowly. Honestly, I don't know. He came crawling the second he lost everything. And the way he looked at me, like I was just a safety net, like I owed him. You don't, she said. You owe you. Whatever gives you peace. That's the only thing that matters. A week later, I flew back to New York. I'd left Ryan's calls unanswered while I was gone, and I came back to 5 more voicemails and a text that simply said, Please, Cole, I'm losing everything. When I pulled into the driveway of the brownstone, I saw him waiting on the front steps, duffel bag beside him, hoodie pulled up, looking like a kicked dog. He stood when he saw me. Cole, thank God, man. I didn't know if you were even coming back. I parked, got out, and stood in front of him. This isn't your home, Ryan. I know, he said quickly, hands raised. I'm not here to stay. Look, I'm sorry. Okay? For everything. For the things I said at the will. For the stuff I did growing up. I was a kid, man. I didn't know what I was doing. You were still saying that stuff 2 years ago. I know. He looked down. I was jealous. You had your life together. You didn't need them the way I did. I raised an eyebrow. You mean you needed their money? He didn't respond, just stared at the ground. I know about Dennis, I said. He looked up sharply. I know he knew Ava. I know I wasn't adopted by accident. He took me to get back at her, and he never loved me, not really. And Linda just followed his lead. But you made a choice every single day to make sure I knew I didn't belong. His jaw clenched. I didn't know about any of that. That's the point, I said. You didn't want to know. You just wanted to win. Silence stretched between us. Then he said, So what now? You slammed the door in my face? Let me fall. I looked at him, at the man who had once been my brother in name, if not in spirit, and I made my decision. No, I said. I'm going to give you one chance. His eyes lit up. I'm setting up a charitable foundation under Ava and George's name. It's going to support underprivileged kids and young adults who were displaced like I was. I'm hiring people who understand hardship, who know how to build something from nothing. And I'm willing to give you a job entry level, starting from scratch. You'll get a salary, but nothing fancy. You'll report to someone else. And if you mess up, you're out. No safety net. No more bailouts. You take this seriously or you walk. He blinked at me. You're serious? Dead serious. He looked away, shoulders slumped. What if I'm not cut out for it? Then you figure it out, I said. Like I did. Like everyone has to. Or you walk away and I don't hear from you again. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. It's been 8 months since then. Ryan took the job. He's been quiet, reserved, but he shows up. He's learning slowly, and I'm watching, not as his savior, not as his brother, but as someone who knows what it's like to rise from nothing. Maria and I talk every week. I've visited her family twice. Her kids call me Uncle Cole, and for the first time in my life, that title feels like it means something. The brownstone is still home, but it's not a castle built from revenge anymore. It's a place of memory, of healing, of legacy. Sometimes late at night, I read Ava's letters again. There's one line I always come back to. You were never a mistake. You were our second chance. And maybe now, finally, I get to be someone else's. Maybe that's what family is supposed to be. Not blood, not paper, but choice. And this time, I'm choosing peace. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Ryan. I'm 29. I work in marketing and live alone. And until a few months ago, I still bent over backward trying to be the good son. You know, the one who always shows up, always pays, always buys gifts. The dependable disappointment, the quiet wallet. And honestly, I thought maybe that was enough to earn a seat at the table. Turns out, it wasn't even enough to earn a plate. It started with a message from my mom 2 weeks ago. Family dinner on the 15th. Dress nice. Smiley face, just like that. No details, no mention of why we were getting together. No hint that it wasn't just some regular takeout and TV kind of night like they usually did. I figured it might be someone's birthday or a mini reunion, but whatever. After years of being half included, I was just happy to be invited to anything. I responded with a simple, sure, looking forward to it, and marked it on my calendar without thinking too hard. The night before, I asked if I could bring anything. No reply. The next morning, I texted again, just confirming the time and place. Still nothing. Finally, around 2 p.m., my sister Emma texted, "Don't stress. Just be there at 7 o'clock. Dress nice." So I did. Suit jacket, slacks, fresh shave. Basically, the most effort I'd put into a family event since my cousin's wedding 4 years ago. I showed up 15 minutes early to this fancy downtown restaurant. One of those places with dim lighting, tiny water glasses, and waiters who speak in gentle whispers. I walked in and gave the reservation name, Green Party, table for 6. They led me to a large round table set for 6 people. For a second, I smiled. Maybe this time would be different. Then the hostess frowned. "Actually, sorry. There seems to be a change. The party is over here." She led me across the room toward a cramped corner next to the kitchen doors. There was a small 2-seater table with a laminated takeout menu from their bar attached. I blinked. "I think there's a mistake. I'm with the Green Party. 6 people." She tilted her head. "That's what I was told. Sir, your family's over there." She gestured back to the main table where I now spotted my mom, Dad, Emma, my older brother Scott, and his wife, already laughing and sipping wine. For a second, I froze. My first instinct was to assume it was just a mix-up, but then Emma turned, saw me, and smirked. "Oh, hey, Ryan," she called over. "We figured you'd probably prefer something simple, so we asked them to give you the takeout menu." Scott leaned back in his chair, his arm lazily thrown around the back of his wife's. "Yeah. Didn't think you'd be into the whole real dinner thing." My mother just sipped her drink and said nothing. My stomach dropped. I looked at my dad, hoping maybe someone would say something normal. Maybe crack a joke or call it a misunderstanding. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he turned to the waiter and said, "We'll start with the oysters and truffle flatbread, and keep the drinks coming." I stood there like a fool, still holding the little black folder with the reservation confirmation email in my phone. I'd offered to help plan this dinner. I'd helped pay for Scott's wedding. I was the one who covered Emma's car insurance for a year after she lost her job. I've picked up groceries, paid medical deductibles, and quietly slipped cash to my parents when the mortgage got tight. And now, I was being given a laminated menu like I was their awkward +1. I didn't sit. I didn't even walk over to my assigned sad little table. I just stood there for a beat, swallowing a mix of embarrassment and a kind of simmering clarity. You know that cold click in your brain when you realize, oh, this isn't a joke. They meant this? That moment snapped something in me. I turned to the waiter who'd brought me over and said in a calm voice, "Actually, I made the reservation. I'll be handling the table." His eyes widened slightly. "Oh, understood, sir." I walked past the main table, ignoring Emma's raised eyebrow and Scott's smug little chuckle, and approached the host stand. "Can you update the billing info on the green reservation?" I asked. She nodded, polite but curious. "Certainly, sir. Who should we put it on?" "The main parties tab. I'll be leaving soon, so I just want to make sure everything's in order." She hesitated for a second. I pulled up the confirmation email, the one I'd made 2 weeks ago, long before my parents even mentioned dinner, and showed her my name on it. That seemed to seal it. Then I quietly walked outside, sat on a bench just around the corner, and waited. I checked my watch. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I imagined the appetizers rolling in, the clinking of glasses, the light laughter as they toasted themselves. At the 20-minute mark, my phone buzzed. "Dad, $1,900? What did you order?" I didn't answer. Not right away anyway, because for the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to fix their mess. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the family doormat. I just sat there, letting the sound of a very expensive dinner crash down on them without lifting a single finger. I stared at my phone screen, watching the angry texts pile in one after another. First, it was Dad. "Seriously, this isn't funny. Fix it now. You made the reservation. You better make this right." Then came one from Emma. "What is wrong with you? You embarrassed us in front of everyone." And Scott, true to form, just sent a thumbs-up emoji with "Classic Ryan. Always got to be the victim." I should have been angry. I should have been pacing around the block, maybe even second-guessing myself like I always used to. But instead, I leaned back, let the cool night air settle on my face, and just breathed. Calm, measured, free. The thing is, that dinner wasn't the beginning of their cruelty. It was just the first time they did it in public. Growing up, I was the easy one. Emma was the golden child. Charming, social, always praised for being so put together. Scott was the classic firstborn. He got a full ride to college, and no matter how many jobs he quit or how condescending he was, Mom and Dad still looked at him like he hung the moon. Me? I was the one who should have tried harder, who should have majored in something more useful, who shouldn't make people uncomfortable with my tone. When I landed my job in marketing, they said it sounded kind of soft. When I bought my first car, they joked that it was nice for a starter vehicle. I paid off my student loans in full before either of them, and they still looked at me like I was borrowing air. And yet, I stayed close. I went home every Thanksgiving. I sent birthday gifts even when they forgot mine. I paid for things I had no business paying for. Why? Because some part of me still believed if I just kept showing up, they'd eventually see me as family. Not just a family member, but that night in that overpriced restaurant, I realized I wasn't just on the outside looking in. I was the glass they were pressing their faces against while laughing. I was the joke, the safety net, the guy who always came through no matter how little they gave back. So I didn't go back in. I let them eat. And as I sat on that bench, basking in the beautiful disaster I'd quietly set in motion, I decided I was done playing that role. The next morning, I woke up to 7 missed calls. 4 from Dad, 2 from Emma, and 1 from my mom. That one shocked me. She rarely called. I listened to the voicemail, half expecting something dramatic. "Ryan, call me back when you get this." That was, "Look, I know that dinner wasn't ideal, but you didn't have to make a scene. Your father's very upset. We all are. And the restaurant says you were the one who made the reservation. They're saying the charges are final. I don't know why you would do something like this. We were trying to give you space. Anyway, please call me." Trying to give me space. That line actually made me laugh. I didn't call her back. Instead, I spent the day making another kind of reservation. At my bank, at my credit card portal, and with every auto payment I'd ever foolishly linked to any of them. Emma's car insurance. Cancelled. Scott's Netflix and gym membership I'd been covering without him realizing. Gone. The family phone plan I was still technically the administrator for. Locked and removed my card. And the big one. My parents' home internet, security system, and supplemental health coverage. All tied to my account because their credit wasn't strong enough when they signed up years ago. All paused. Not deleted, not sabotaged, just removed the funding. By that evening, I had a spreadsheet. Nothing dramatic, just a list, a clear breakdown of what I had been paying for, what I had quietly carried. I didn't send it to them. Not yet. I waited, and it didn't take long. The next morning, Dad texted me in all caps, "Why is the internet down? Did you do something to the account?" 5 minutes later, Mom chimed in, "Ryan, your father's having a meltdown over the Wi-Fi and the cameras. Please fix whatever you did." Then Emma, "Did you cancel my insurance? My card's not working. I got stopped by a cop this morning. I had to show him screenshots." And finally, Scott, who never texts unless it's a demand, "You messed up the Netflix and the gym. Are you 12? That one I replied to, "I thought you didn't want the soft guy in your life making decisions for you. Just honoring your wishes." The silence after that was music. By the end of the week, my dad tried calling 8 times. The last voicemail was surprisingly quiet. "Son, okay, look, let's just talk. We're not saying you don't have the right to feel upset, but this isn't how family handles problems." Took everything in me not to laugh because all I could think was, exactly. I had handled it their way for years, by swallowing it, by letting the resentment simmer under the surface, by staying quiet while they made digs and jokes and decisions that excluded me. And now that I wasn't doing that anymore, suddenly it was a problem. But I wasn't angry. I was done. That Sunday, I drove past the old family house. Not to go in, not to knock, just to remind myself I didn't belong there anymore. I saw the porch light flickering, something I used to fix every few months when Dad couldn't get the ladder out. The front yard was overgrown, probably waiting for me to show up and mow it. I didn't stop. I just kept driving because the best part of all this? They hadn't even realized what else I'd quietly been planning behind the scenes. And when that hits them, well, let's just say that $1,900 dinner might start to feel like a generous discount. 3 days after the dinner fiasco, I got a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Definitely not at 8:47 on a Wednesday morning when I was still nursing a coffee and debating whether to log into work or just stare at spreadsheets in a state of mild existential dread. I peeked through the peephole, half expecting it to be a neighbor needing help with a package or maybe one of those energy plan sales reps. But no, it was my mom, dressed in business casual like she'd just come from a PDA meeting, holding a tote bag that said, "Live, laugh, love," and wearing an expression that tried to balance concern with condescension. That tight-lipped look I knew too well. The "I'm only here because I have to be civil" face. I opened the door slowly, bracing myself. "Hi," she said, like we hadn't spoken through a voicemail laced with thinly veiled guilt just days before. "Hi," I replied flatly. She glanced past me into the apartment like she was checking for signs of squalor or maybe hoping to spot some framed reminder of how much better off I was with them. I didn't invite her in. I thought we could talk in person. I didn't move from the doorway. "About?" She blinked, apparently not expecting the lack of a warm welcome. "About this whole situation. The dinner, the payments. Your father's been really upset." I nodded. "Yeah, that sounds rough." Her mouth twitched. "Ryan, don't be like this. You know your father doesn't express things well. He was just trying to make the evening special by seating me next to the kitchen with a takeout menu?" I tilted my head. "That was your idea of special?" Silence. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "You've always been sensitive." There it was. The word, like it was a flaw I hadn't outgrown, as if expecting basic respect made me the emotional one. "You know," I said slowly, "being sensitive is a lot easier when you're constantly being told you don't belong." She took a deep breath like she was preparing for a TED Talk. "I think what we're struggling with is your need to be the center of attention. You always take things personally. It was just dinner, Ryan. One dinner that I paid for, that I organized, that I wasn't even invited to properly. That's not fair." She snapped, before immediately softening. "Look, can't we just move on? Undo whatever you did with the accounts. Fix the mess." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You want me to fix the mess?" She blinked again. "You know what I mean." "I do. You mean you want me to go back to covering everything while being treated like an afterthought. That's not what anyone wants. You just made everything so dramatic." I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictably tone-deaf. I almost admired the consistency. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my receipts folder. Literally screenshots, spreadsheets, transactions with annotations. I didn't shove it in her face, just held it casually where she could see the sheer volume. I tracked everything. Every dime I've covered in the last 3 years. Emma's insurance. Scott's phone. Your security system, groceries, streaming services, pet insurance for a dog I've never even met. $21,389. Her face paled. You're exaggerating. I can print the reports. She didn't say anything. So, let me ask you this, Mom. When you and Dad laughed about putting me at the casual table, when Emma said I wouldn't want to be part of the real dinner, was that part of the plan, too? Or just a bonus joke at my expense? Her eyes dropped. I think we've all said things we didn't mean. But you meant to exclude me. She didn't answer that. We stood in silence for a while. Finally, she said, Your father wants you to come to dinner on Sunday. Proper one. We'll make your favorite, lasagna? I asked flatly. She smiled weakly. Yes. I let the silence linger before answering. I'll think about it. She looked relieved, like that meant I was softening. But I wasn't, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already contacted the estate lawyer. The family home, the one my name is partially on because I co-signed during the refinance 5 years ago to help them get a lower interest rate. I'd formally initiated the process to relinquish my liability and ownership claim, which sounds generous until you realize that without my credit, the bank reevaluates the loan. And given their current financial state, they're either going to have to sell or take on a massively higher monthly payment. And the best part? They have no idea it's coming yet. But they will. Because when that letter arrives from the bank, when they realize they're not just losing the financial padding but the structural support beneath everything, they're going to feel it. And for once, I won't be there to pick up the pieces. But I'll watch quietly, just like they used to watch me eat alone. I didn't go to dinner that Sunday. Instead, I spent the evening making lasagna in my own kitchen with my favorite music playing. No passive-aggressive comments and no sudden guilt trips. Just me, a glass of wine, and the comforting realization that I had finally stepped out of the box they'd spent years building around me. The next morning, I received a call from the family's longtime estate attorney, Mr. Callahan, a quiet, professional man in his late 60s who always reminded me of a librarian that had accidentally gotten a law degree. I'd spoken to him 3 times over the past 2 months, arranging everything behind the scenes. The mortgage, the ownership shares, and more importantly, my removal. He was calling to confirm that the formal notice had been delivered that morning. Your parents were both home when the courier dropped it off, he said gently. I expect you'll be hearing from them soon. He wasn't wrong. At 9:17 a.m., the calls began. First, Dad. What is this letter? You're pulling out of the refinance? Are you insane? Do you have any idea what this does to our mortgage? Then a follow-up. Dad. Callahan says we either refinance without your credit or sell. You know damn well we can't get the same rate again. You're going to bankrupt your own family. I didn't reply. At 9:40 a.m., my mom called. Voicemail. Ryan, honey, I don't understand what's going on. This can't be right. We talked about dinner. You said you'd think about it. Why would you blindside us like this? By 10 a.m., Scott joined in. You're seriously pulling this now over dinner? You drama queen. Grow up and fix it. Then Emma, okay, you made your point. Enough already. You've humiliated us. We're all suffering. If that makes you feel better, congrats. Hope you're happy. I didn't respond to them either, because I didn't do any of this to get attention or revenge for revenge's sake. I did it because I had finally come to terms with the fact that they would never see me as an equal, never treat me with respect, never give me a seat at the table unless I built the table, paid for the chairs, and served the food myself. And even then, they'd still hand me a takeout menu. Later that afternoon, I got a knock on my apartment door again. This time it was Dad. He didn't wait to be invited in. He just barged past me like he owned the place, nostrils flaring. We need to talk. I stayed near the door. We are. He paced like a caged animal. You blindsided us. You blindsided me after everything I've done for you. I actually laughed. Like what? Mocking me at dinner? Letting Emma and Scott treat me like an afterthought while I paid for half their lives. His jaw clenched. You always play the victim. No, I said calmly. I just finally stopped volunteering for the role. He pointed a finger at me. We're your family. You don't just walk away from family when things get hard. That's rich, I said, folding my arms. You walked away from me emotionally a long time ago. I just finally stopped chasing you. He went quiet then, like the weight of those words hit him in the chest. Look, he said after a long pause, trying a different tone. We're in a bad spot. If this goes through, we'll lose the house. You know that. I do. So, you're just going to let that happen? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not letting anything happen. I'm stepping back. The consequences are just the natural result of what you all built. You're punishing everyone because you didn't like your seat at dinner. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm walking away because after years of giving and giving, you made it clear I'd never be more than convenient. Not loved, not respected, just useful. You didn't even see me. He looked away, jaw tightening. Then he muttered, We didn't think you'd care. And there it was. The truth. I didn't say anything after that. I didn't need to. He stood there a moment longer like he wanted to fight, like he was waiting for me to break, to fold, to do what I always did, apologize, smooth things over, make it easier for them. But I didn't. Eventually, he turned and left without another word. A week passed. The house went up for sale. A real estate sign appeared in their perfectly manicured yard. One I used to mow for free every summer when I still thought that meant something. They tried to make it look voluntary, told relatives they were downsizing. But everyone in the family chat knew. Word spreads fast when 3 adult children are suddenly looking for backup loans and couch space. Emma posted some cryptic Instagram story about betrayal by those closest to you, followed by a picture of her car with a parking boot because she hadn't renewed her insurance yet. Scott started a GoFundMe with a sob story about financial hardship. It raised $80 from 2 coworkers and his high school gym teacher. Mom emailed me once just a link to an old photo album, one of us from a beach trip years ago. I didn't open it because, here's the thing, I didn't need memories to remind me what I'd lost. I needed to protect the peace I had finally earned. 3 months later, the house sold. They moved into a smaller rental on the edge of town. Emma had to pick up extra shifts. Scott got his gym membership canceled and started jogging in public parks, which he whined about daily online. Mom and Dad stopped calling. And me? I went to Italy. It wasn't planned. Just a sudden burst of spontaneity. I'd saved for it over the years, always telling myself it wasn't the right time. But when I saw the sold listing for the house pop up on Zillow, I booked the ticket the same night. I sat in Florence watching the sun bleed gold over the Arno River, sipping espresso and breathing. Really breathing. For the first time in my adult life. No debt tied to other people. No emotional chain around my ankle. Just freedom. Pure earned freedom. One night, as I watched the city lights flicker on, I got a message from a number I hadn't saved but recognized instantly. Mom texted, I hope you're okay. We're all struggling. Dad hasn't been the same. We miss you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote one word, goodbye. I blocked the number. Not out of hate, not even out of spite, but because I knew if I left the door open even an inch, they'd wedge themselves back in with guilt, with shame, with half apologies and full expectations. And I was done with that. They taught me what family shouldn't look like. And I learned, finally, how to build one of my own. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary. One that doesn't ask me to sit by the kitchen doors while they toast each other over appetizers I paid for. One that starts with me and ends with peace. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My family said I was too negative to come to Thanksgiving. It's about gratitude and you killed the vibe, they said. The next day, I got a Venmo request, $1,780 for groceries plus wine. I sent nothing. I just canceled my grocery delivery login, locked their family plan, and flagged every order linked to my card. 48 hours later, Maya texted, "Did our Netflix just die? What's going on?" I found out I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving through a group text I wasn't even part of. My sister Rachel sent me a screenshot. Mom had posted in the family chat something like, "Let's keep this year light and positive. Kyle's negativity tends to drain the room. Maybe it's better if it's just us." The way she worded it made it sound like she was reluctantly excluding me for the greater good, like she was sacrificing her own comfort for the spiritual health of the turkey. Rachel added a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No commentary, no defense, just a quiet confirmation that once again, I was the problem. I stared at the message for a while, not angry yet, just stunned at how casually they could do that. I hadn't even spoken to anyone in that group for a month. I'd been working, keeping to myself, sending over money when they asked. Never once did I ask for anything in return. Then came the kicker. The next morning, I woke up to a Venmo request from my brother Matt. $780. The note read, "Groceries plus wine. For everyone." With a smiley face. That last part made me laugh. For everyone. They didn't even try to sugarcoat it. Just to be clear, when I say I help them out financially, I mean I've been covering the gaps for years. The family phone plan was under my name. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, the Wi-Fi at their house, all linked to my card. I even paid for Mom's gas for a while through an app. They'd gotten used to it. Entitled, even. The funny thing is I never minded helping when I started. We didn't grow up with much. Our house was the kind where you had to shake the TV to get it working and tape the microwave door shut. Mom worked 2 jobs when I was in high school. Dad was barely around. I used to promise myself that if I ever made real money, I'd make things easier for them. And I did. I worked my ass off, lived cheap, stayed focused. I wasn't some genius. I just showed up every day. For $1,000 a month isn't flashy. But for where we came from, it was solid. What bothered me wasn't the money. It was the disrespect. They cut me out of Thanksgiving, literally said I ruined the mood, and then turned around and asked for almost $800 like I was a vending machine that ran on emotional neglect. So I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I just acted. First, I canceled the Whole Foods delivery scheduled for the morning of Thanksgiving. That hit fast. Then, I logged into the phone account and suspended all the lines but mine. I flagged my cards on every service they were using. Netflix, Disney+, Hulu, Spotify. I unlinked my payment method from DoorDash and Uber Eats. I went into Amazon and marked every saved address that wasn't mine as suspicious activity. It took me about 20 minutes to erase myself from their lives financially. I didn't feel bad. I felt like I should have done it sooner. 48 hours later, the messages started trickling in. The first was from my Aunt Karen. "Is our Netflix broken? What's going on?" She always noticed tech problems first. I ignored it. Then Rachel tried calling. I didn't pick up. Then Matt sent a new message on Venmo. "Hey man, did you see the request? Everyone's waiting." Everyone, like I was the waiter in some invisible restaurant and they were just deciding which wine to pair with the audacity. Then came Mom. 2 missed calls in one night after months of silence. I stared at the screen as it rang and didn't even consider answering. She'd spoken her truth. I was unwelcome, unpleasant, and unworthy of sitting at their table. Fine. Then she could pay for her own damn groceries. They weren't used to consequences, not from me. And that's when things really started to unravel. The group chat revived itself on a Sunday afternoon, 3 days after Thanksgiving. Not the original one I wasn't invited to. This was a fresh creation. Rachel started it. The new title was Let's Talk Like Adults, which was already ironic considering they'd spent the holiday pretending I didn't exist. First message came from Mom. "Kyle, we need to talk about the phone situation. I can't make calls and neither can your dad. It's unsafe." Then Matt. "Hey man, Netflix, Spotify, Wi-Fi, everything's down. You could have just said you were mad." I didn't say anything at first. Just stared at the screen, debating whether I should even waste the energy. Then I wrote, "I'm not your bank." Rachel sent back a whole wall of text. Something about how this isn't how families should behave and how I had humiliated them during a time that's supposed to be about love and togetherness. She ended it with, "We all depend on each other, Kyle." You're not the only one carrying things. I had to reread that part. Not the only one. I'd love to see the math on that. A couple of hours later, the calls started from unknown numbers. I ignored them until one came through that I recognized. A local number from my hometown. I answered out of morbid curiosity. It was Dad. He sounded like he hadn't aged a day, even though I knew that wasn't true. Same tone he used when I was 14 and he needed me to help him fix the car he refused to take to a mechanic. He said he heard there were some misunderstandings and that he wanted to have a quick man-to-man. I let him speak for about 10 seconds before I told him I wasn't in the mood for a catch-up. He started saying something about setting a better example for Matt, and I ended the call. They weren't used to being ignored. They were used to me swallowing it. I'd been doing it for years. They'd say things like I was difficult or too intense while I quietly paid their internet bill. I was the safety net they never acknowledged until it snapped. That week was a slow-motion collapse. First, their Netflix profiles disappeared. Matt messaged Rachel asking if she had a backup account. She didn't. Then came the Wi-Fi issue. Mom posted on Facebook asking if anyone had a router to spare, saying theirs was acting up. Then someone tried to log into my old bank app. I got an alert. It had come from their zip code. They probably thought I'd forgotten to change the passwords. The funniest moment came when my aunt, the same one who texted me about Netflix, posted a picture of their Thanksgiving dinner. It was 2 rotisserie chickens from the grocery store and box stuffing. She captioned it, "Simple and sweet, just how we like it." Rachel commented, "So cozy," with a heart emoji. I didn't bother saying anything, but I knew they were all furious under the smiley faces and filters. Then Rachel sent a voice message. I didn't play it all, just heard the beginning. "Mom cried last night. You really hurt her, Kyle. This isn't you." I stopped listening after that because it was me, just not the version they were used to. I used to give quietly. Now I was withholding with the same silence. And that silence was louder than anything I could have shouted. By the time December rolled in, they were starting to panic. It had been over a week since I'd shut it all down. No groceries arriving on the porch. No autopay smoothing over their messes. No streaming services buffering quietly in the background. What I'd done wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, clean, and they didn't know how to live without it. Rachel was the first to shift strategies. She dropped the concerned sister act and tried small talk. She sent a meme about the cold weather, then a blurry selfie with her dog wearing a little red sweater. Then she hit me with a "look who got arrested" LOL message. Some guy from our high school who had been caught stealing copper wiring or something. The kind of messages she'd normally send when she wanted me to remember that we were siblings and not just adults who grew up in the same house. But I knew that move. I'd seen it before. It always came right before she asked for something. This time, though, the ask never came. Not directly. She was trying the long game. Keep the door open, stay friendly, and hope I'd come around. I didn't reply to anything. No need. She knew why the silence was there. Matt didn't bother with subtlety. He sent me a text on Tuesday that read, "Bro, I'm $300 short on rent. Can you help me out? I'll pay you back Friday." I didn't even bother to laugh. Matt's Fridays had been coming and going unpaid for 6 years. I left him on read. The next morning, "You could have just said no instead of freezing everyone out. This is messed up." That one I didn't even open. I knew what it said before the preview finished loading. In his world, setting boundaries was the same thing as starting a war. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from Mom. Subject, "We need to talk." She always used email when she wanted to make something sound more civilized. Like we were coworkers. It was 3 long paragraphs filled with polished guilt. She said things like, "You've made your point," and "I raised you better than this," and "This isn't what family is supposed to look like." Her tone was calm, but every word was loaded. She made it sound like I was the one who broke something sacred. What she didn't say, what none of them ever said, was "thank you." For the groceries, the phones, the Christmas flights, the utility bills, the birthdays, the sudden emergencies that only ever happened to them. No one ever thanked me. They just expected it, like it was my job to earn and their job to need. That night I checked Venmo. Matt had sent another request, $52.34. No message. A few hours later, Rachel sent $11.99 for Hulu. It was so ridiculous. I had to laugh. They still hadn't gotten it. I declined both. No note. Just a quiet, simple no. That same night, Rachel posted an old Christmas photo on Instagram. Me, her, Matt, all in matching pajamas from some year when we were still pretending to be close. Mom and Dad were in the background caught mid-laugh like they were remembering how to be a family. Her caption was pure bait. Some people forget what family means, but I never will. The comments were a stream of hearts and so cuties from her friends. I didn't say anything. I didn't even click on it, but I did send her something else. A Venmo request for $500. Labeled, Reimbursement, Christmas Gifts 2023. She declined it. 2 minutes later, I was blocked. Perfect. That was the thing. They didn't want a family. They wanted funding. And they just lost the only person who'd been dumb enough to keep paying for it. By mid-December, the silence between us had turned into something heavier. It wasn't tension anymore. It was something worse. Acceptance. The kind that creeps in when people realize they've pushed a good thing too far and there's no rewind button. Nobody called. Nobody asked me for money again. They'd stopped trying to manipulate their way back in. But they hadn't apologized either. Not even close. What they did instead was start to quietly clean up the mess. I found out through a friend from my hometown who messaged me on Instagram. Dude, is everything all right with your parents? Your mom's listing like half the house on Facebook Marketplace. I checked. She was right. The treadmill I bought them last Christmas was listed for $120. The blender I shipped to her 2 birthdays ago, $135. Even the faux leather love seat from the guest room, the one I helped them pick out during a visit 2 years ago, was on there. Gently used, pickup only. That's when it hit me. They were liquidating. Not downsizing, not spring cleaning, liquidating. And not once had they said a word. 2 days later, a small package showed up at my place. No return address. Inside was a cheap Christmas card, one of those generic ones with glitter that flakes off into your rug. Inside was exactly $500 in 20s, folded neatly, and a note that read, "We don't want your money. We want our son. Love, Mom and Dad." It was like watching someone hold up a white flag made out of the same material they used to tie you up. I didn't touch the money. I left it on my kitchen counter for 2 days while I thought about what kind of game they were playing. Because here's the thing. I knew they didn't have $500 just lying around. That was probably the treadmill and maybe the love seat, possibly the blender, too. And suddenly the meaning of that message flipped. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't love. It was strategy, a calculated sacrifice to win me back. Because if they couldn't guilt me, maybe they could impress me with an unexpected gesture. So, I took the cash, slid it back into the envelope, added Matt's address on it, and dropped it in the mailbox. No message, no explanation. Let them figure out what to do with their refund. A few nights later, Rachel posted another vintage photo. This time it was from a summer camping trip when we were kids. Matt and I were covered in dirt, roasting marshmallows. Our dad was somewhere in the background, fiddling with a broken tent pole. She captioned it, "Back when we were all together." The likes rolled in, comments from people who hadn't talked to us in years. Stuff like, "Family is everything," and "Miss those days." I didn't respond. I didn't even open the comments. But I saw the pattern. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to rewrite it. In their version of the story, I was the one who walked away. I was the one who chose pride over peace. They were turning it into some quiet tragedy. Like they had no idea how things got this way. So I gave them what they wanted. I opened my bank app and transferred exactly $500 to my parents' joint account. Then, I sent a message. Not through Rachel. Not through Matt. Directly to my mother's phone because I knew she still had the old number saved. "This is the last time. Don't contact me unless it's not about money." The message was read within minutes. No reply. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. That silence. It was the cleanest sound I'd heard in years. The silence held for nearly 3 weeks. Then, out of nowhere, came the knock. It was Saturday morning. I hadn't showered yet, hadn't checked my phone. I wasn't expecting a delivery and I never got visitors. I looked through the peephole and froze. It was my dad. Not angry, not trying to look emotional, just standing there with a brown paper grocery bag and the same awkward stiffness he carried when I was a kid, and he needed to say something serious but didn't know how. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His shoulders slightly slouched like someone who had finally realized the weight he carried wasn't just from age. I opened the door halfway. He held out the bag. He said Mom had cooked something, lasagna, he thought. Maybe banana bread, too. She wanted me to have it. No speech, no guilt, just that. I didn't move to take it. Then he said it soft, almost like it was a mistake. She's thinking about leaving. I blinked. Leaving what? Leaving me, the house, this whole thing. He looked tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from one fight or one bad month, but from years of coasting on things that never worked. He said she'd been talking to her sister in Michigan, looking at jobs online. Told him she was tired of pretending we were a family when clearly we weren't. He said she sat up until 3 a.m. the other night going through photos, cleaning out closets, and muttering to herself about what she should have done differently. That's when I took the bag. Not because I believed any of it, not yet, but because I needed a second to think. He didn't ask to come in, didn't try to sit down or say anything else. Just nodded once and walked back down the hallway. Quiet, like he knew showing up had been risky and was already regretting it. Inside the bag was her lasagna, the one she used to make when we were kids, and we had nothing in the fridge but tomato paste and a box of pasta, and a loaf of banana bread wrapped in foil. No note, no explanation. I set it in the fridge and stared at it like it might detonate. That night, Rachel texted me, "Did Dad stop by?" I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, Matt messaged, "You know about Mom's plan, right?" Nope. Still nothing from me. Then, the next morning, I woke up to a missed call from a Michigan number and a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was calm but shaky. She said she didn't expect a response, just wanted me to know she was applying for work near her sister's place, and that if she did go, she didn't want to leave without at least trying to make peace. Not fix, not undo, just try. And then she said, "I know it doesn't mean much right now, but I'm sorry, Kyle, for the way we leaned on you, for acting like it was your job to carry us. I think we all just got used to you doing what none of us were willing to do." That part did something to me. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back. But I sat there in silence for almost an hour, just thinking. It was the first honest sentence anyone in my family had said to me in years. I still didn't reply, but I didn't delete the voicemail either. Christmas came and went without a word from me. I didn't call. I didn't send gifts. I didn't even check social media. Rachel posted a photo of a half-decorated tree with the caption, "Quiet Christmas this year. Not everyone shows up, and that's okay." Passive-aggressive and obviously directed at me. Matt commented, "Family is what you make of it," which was rich coming from someone who once tried to Venmo me $849 for his haircut because Mom said you'd cover it. Then came the call. Not to me, of course. To my boss. I was sitting at my desk reviewing quarterly numbers when he came over, scratching the back of his neck. He told me someone had called asking for employment verification and left a message claiming to be my landlord. Except I don't have a landlord. I own my condo. I asked if he still had the number. He did. Michigan area code. I called it. It was Rachel. I didn't even have to say anything. The second she picked up, she started talking like she'd been caught stealing from a store, but thought if she explained fast enough, the alarm would shut off. She said she was trying to help Mom figure out what kind of support she might qualify for if she moved. Said they needed proof of my income so they could list me as a potential cosigner, just in case. I hung up immediately. 10 minutes later, a text from her. "You don't have to be so dramatic. We were just checking. Nothing's been signed." I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, not even shocked, just amazed at how little had changed under all the apologies and silences. They still thought I was the fallback plan. Still thought they had access to pieces of my life just because we shared blood and a childhood full of broken microwaves and secondhand sweaters. Then late that night, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. It was from a woman named Andrea. She said she was my mom's coworker at a temp office near Detroit. She wanted to apologize for everything that had happened at the interview. I scrolled down. Andrea had accidentally attached a photo. My mom sitting across a desk, her face red, hands clasped tightly, eyes slightly puffy. According to Andrea, the interview had been going fine until my mom listed me as her financial safety net. Literally called me her unofficial provider. Said that if the job didn't work out, she had a son who could cover her bills for a few months. She said it like I was an ATM she hadn't finished using yet. I didn't respond to Andrea. It wasn't her fault. But I did reply to Rachel. One sentence. If anyone mentions my name in a job application again, I'll consider it identity fraud. No response. I didn't expect one. What I didn't see coming was what happened 3 days later. I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was my mom's. Inside was a check for $500 and a note. Consider this a start. We're not owed your help. I see that now. But what stood out wasn't the money or the apology. It was the PS. If I go, I'm going alone. There was no mention of Dad, of Rachel, of Matt. Just her. And for the first time, I didn't know what I wanted her to do because this time, the silence felt like a question I wasn't sure how to answer. I stared at that PS over and over again. If I go, I'm going alone. No Rachel, no Matt, no Dad, just her. That sentence echoed louder than anything she'd said in months. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a ploy. It felt like someone trying to escape their own story. I didn't reply. I didn't cash the check either. I kept it in the envelope tucked in a drawer with receipts I never look at. Not because I was trying to hold it over her, but because I didn't know what to do with it. I still don't. The next update came not from my family, but from my dad. He texted me. That alone was strange enough. All it said was, "She's gone." I called. She'd moved, packed a single suitcase and took a bus to Michigan. Didn't tell anyone, but left a note for him on the kitchen table. No goodbye, no dramatic scene. Just, I need to be a person again. My dad sounded empty. Not angry, not grieving, just stunned. Like a man who finally realized that silence isn't the same as peace. Rachel tried calling me 2 days later. I didn't pick up. Then Matt left a voice message that sounded more confused than anything. So what? She just left? Like, for real? Yeah, for real. None of them knew what to do without her. She'd always been the center, not because she was nurturing or endlessly kind, but because she was the one who held the dysfunctional machine together with duct tape and passive-aggressive text messages. Now the machine had no center, just a few disconnected parts trying to spin on their own. Weeks passed. Then came a letter, Michigan postmark. Her handwriting. She said she got a part-time job at a small clinic. Said she walks to work. Said she eats dinner alone but doesn't mind it. Said she's not lonely, just quiet. And then she wrote something I'll never forget. I'm not writing to fix us. I just want you to know I'm finally trying to fix myself. I folded the letter and set it down next to her check. Felt like the end of something. Not a sad end, just a true one. Rachel and Matt still talk. They post photos of each other now, comment on each other's stories. I think they're trying to build something without Mom propping them up. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I'm not part of it either way. My dad hasn't reached out again, not since the text. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My family told me the trip was too crowded already, but I noticed $3,700 disappear from my account. Matching luggage sets for hotel rooms and amusement park passes. I didn't confront them. I filed disputes, froze the account, and revoked the travel insurance policy. At the gate, they were denied boarding. My brother texted, "They're saying we're flagged." I sent back a thumbs up. I wasn't planning anything extravagant, just a solo trip to Seattle. I'd been meaning to go for years, catch a Mariners game, hit the Chihuly Museum, eat ridiculous seafood, and pretend I was the kind of person who journals in cafes with brick walls. I'd been saving bit by bit, mostly skipping nights out, eating leftovers, and pretending Uber didn't exist. So, when I opened my bank app and saw $3,700 gone, I froze. I wasn't mad at first, just confused. I thought maybe I mistyped something or forgot a big payment, but the transactions were all there, clear as day. $689.99 for luggage from Samsonite. Hotel rooms booked at La Beach and Golf Resort in Naples, Florida. Multiple charges for Busch Gardens, prepaid meals, spa bookings, and a few rideshare pre-orders. It was like watching someone live their best vacation life on my tab. At first, I thought I'd been hacked. But then I noticed the shipping address on the luggage was my parents' house. And just like that, the confusion drained out of me and got replaced with something heavier. I remembered about a year ago, I helped my mom buy something online when her card expired mid-checkout. I'd logged into my bank on her phone. Apparently, I never logged out, so they took it quietly without a word. My own parents. When I brought it up, my dad barely looked up from his morning paper. My mom said they were going to Florida and things had been tight financially, but that they figured I'd understand. I wasn't using the money right away and, besides, the trip would have been too crowded if I'd gone too. Like that was supposed to soften the blow. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just said, okay. Then I went home, filed a fraud report with the bank, froze the account, opened a new one at a different bank, and canceled the travel insurance that had been bought under my name. I flagged any future bookings in my name and got email alerts for every possible airline they might try. 2 days later, I watched through my Delta app as the boarding passes for 4 flights to Florida, mine technically, were voided at the gate. 20 minutes later, my brother Josh texted me, "They say we've been blocked." I sent him a thumbs-up emoji. Just that. I didn't feel the need to explain myself. He didn't reply. Josh was living in my spare room rent-free because our parents said he needed some time to get back on his feet after quitting his job last fall. I covered the groceries, the Wi-Fi, sometimes even gas money. I never blamed him for what our parents did. But he wasn't exactly innocent either. He knew what they did and still packed his bags for Naples like it was nothing. I didn't want enemies. I still don't. But that was theft, flat out. They treated me like an ATM with arms. And when I caught them, they looked me in the eye and made it sound like I was the unreasonable one. But the truth is, I didn't stop them. I just started making them pay for it. And I was only getting started. They were supposed to be gone for 10 days. I gave them 4. On the 5th day, they were back in Charlotte, rolling their suitcases into their driveway like nothing happened. The La Beach and Golf Resort had denied their check-in. Something about a payment discrepancy. I already knew. I'd flagged the transaction. The bank reversed it, and the resort had no way to validate the reservation anymore. I even called the front desk myself anonymously to make sure. I didn't yell or explain anything. I just waited and listened as the manager told me calmly that, yes, the booking was canceled and the room was no longer available. No refund. The system showed disputed funds. That was enough for me. The amusement park tickets, voided. The luggage they ordered was marked, returned to sender. They probably packed in plastic Target bags by the end of the trip. The last thing I saw from them before they went quiet was my mom's Facebook post. It was a picture of her holding our cat in her lap with the caption, "Some vacations don't go as planned, but at least there's no place like home," with a forced heart emoji that told me everything I needed to know. Josh walked back into the apartment like nothing had happened. He had the nerve to toss his sandals off at the door and ask if there was any orange juice left. I didn't answer. I just kept watching TV. He took the hint and went straight to his room. He didn't try to talk to me until 2 days later. I was eating cold pasta out of the pot when he sat across from me and asked if I was really going to make him move out. I told him yes. He blinked like it caught him off guard, like he still thought there was a chance I'd just get over it. I reminded him he'd lived in my place for nearly a year without paying rent. I paid for his groceries, his laundry detergent, the Uber to his job interview last month. All of it. Not because he forced me, but because I thought it mattered, because I thought family looked out for each other. And in return, he went on a vacation booked with stolen money and didn't say a word. He said he didn't know they used my account until after the fact. Maybe that was true, but it was what he did after that mattered. He still packed. He still went. He still sent me a photo from the plane with a dumb gif of someone wearing sunglasses. I told him he had 30 days. No more. Our parents started texting me again after that, mostly my mom. Long paragraphs about how I was taking things too far, how I'd made my point, and now I was just being cruel. I didn't reply to most of them, just read and close them. One day I got a message from my dad. It was a single sentence: check your account. They transferred back the full amount, the entire $3,700. I looked at the deposit and stared at it for a long time. It didn't make me feel better. It just made things more complicated because now I couldn't pretend they didn't care. They were trying, I guess. But it didn't change the fact that they only did it after being caught, humiliated, blocked at the airport, and publicly made to cancel their plans. I didn't say thank you. I didn't respond. That night, I went to Josh's door and knocked. I told him the 30-day deadline still stood. He looked disappointed but didn't argue. Maybe he realized by then this wasn't just about him. He was a consequence of a much bigger betrayal. A week later, our parents showed up at my apartment without warning. I didn't let them in. We talked through the door. My mom apologized. My dad stood behind her and said they thought I'd be okay with it, that they didn't expect me to take it that far, and that they just wanted a break from everything. I told them flatly I wasn't their safety net anymore. Not for travel, not for bills, not for Josh. If they wanted him to have a roof, they could pay for it. They left without saying goodbye. I stood behind the door long after they were gone. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. They broke something. And even if they returned every penny, they weren't getting it back the way it was. By the third week, things went quiet. Josh kept to himself, mostly job hunting from his room and tiptoeing around the apartment like a guest in someone else's Airbnb. I didn't go out of my way to talk to him. We lived like strangers under one roof, which was probably easier for both of us. I started noticing how little my phone lit up. No more family group chat pings. No forwarded memes from mom. No weekend check-ins. The silence should have felt peaceful. Instead, it just felt weird. Like someone had pulled the plug on a machine I didn't even know had been humming in the background my whole life. A few nights later, I got a call from an unknown number around midnight. I didn't answer. A minute later, a voicemail came through. It was my dad mumbling something about mom having chest pains and them being in the ER. I didn't even finish listening to it. I sat there holding my phone, wondering if it was another guilt card. But curiosity got the better of me, and I checked their location through the shared Find My setting mom had forgotten to turn off. They were at Atrium Health Pineville. So at least that part was true. I didn't go. They had each other. And I wasn't their backup anymore. The next morning, I got a text from my dad. Everything's fine. Stress-related. She's resting. Then another one. We know we messed up, but you shutting us out like this. It's not right either. I didn't reply. I sat with it. I thought about all the times I'd said yes to things that felt wrong just to keep the peace. How every time they called it helping, it really meant paying. I was done being the emergency fund they never had. I didn't owe them comfort. Then came the kicker. Josh knocked on my door and asked if we could talk. I let him in, and he sat on the edge of my bed like he was back in high school confessing to breaking curfew. He told me he got a job offer. Nothing major, just a warehouse gig with overnight hours, but it was a start. Problem was, he needed to cover a $1,200 car repair to get his old Civic back on the road. He said he'd asked our parents first, but they couldn't do it. They said they were still catching up after the canceled trip and the hospital bill. I almost laughed. They had no problem using my money for a vacation but suddenly had nothing left when their younger son needed a working car. He asked if I could lend it to him. Just a loan, he said. He swore he'd pay it back. And here's the messed up part. I did it. I transferred him the $1,200 without another word because Josh, for all his passivity, wasn't the one who took anything from me directly. And he had finally started trying. That counted for something. But I also told him this was it. No more extensions, no more free rent, no more brotherly bailouts. I wasn't anyone's plan B anymore. He said he understood, and I believed him. I still kicked him out the following week. Not out of spite, just because it was time. And once he was gone, the apartment felt different. Not quieter, just mine. Josh moved out on a gray Sunday that smelled like rain and dust. He didn't have a lot. 2 duffel bags, a plastic laundry basket full of tangled wires, and a broken IKEA lamp he still insisted on taking. He didn't say much, just nodded and said, "Thanks," when I helped carry the last box to his borrowed Corolla. He stood there for a second like he wanted to say something else, but didn't. Then he got in, started the car, and left. The apartment felt bigger immediately, and not in a good way, just emptier. I thought I'd feel relief. I did, sort of, but it wasn't clean. It was like pulling out a splinter that's been there too long. It hurts more after it's gone. 3 days went by before I got the first voicemail. My mom. Her voice was tight, like she'd been practicing it. "Hi, honey. Just wanted to say we love you. Your dad's been... Well, we just want to talk. No pressure." Then a second one later that night, this time from my dad. Shorter. "You've made your point, Ethan. Can we talk now?" I didn't respond. By the end of the week, they stopped trying to get to me directly. Instead, they outsourced it. First was a voicemail from my old high school principal. I hadn't spoken to the guy since I was 17. He said something about how he'd heard there was a family disagreement and that I should remember who raised me. I deleted the message before he could finish whatever speech he'd agreed to deliver on my parents' behalf. The next day, I got a Facebook message from Susan, my dad's former coworker. I met her once at a 4th of July barbecue when I was 15. She wrote a long, rambling paragraph about how families go through tough seasons and hearts heal in time. She ended it with a Bible verse. Then came the final straw. My Aunt Rachel, who lives in Michigan and never once remembered my birthday, left a comment under a photo of my dog. "Hope you find it in your heart to reconnect with your folks soon. Life's too short." It felt like an ambush, like they'd started a full-scale campaign to guilt me into forgetting what they did. And the worst part, none of them even knew the real story. My parents were obviously controlling the narrative. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I texted both of my parents at once. "Stop sending people after me. If you're sorry, be sorry. But I'm not going to forget that you stole from me and made me feel like the bad guy when I stood up for myself." They didn't respond. Finally, for the next couple of weeks, the silence settled in. The kind that doesn't feel like peace, just absence. I came home, made dinner for one, watched dumb movies, and stared at my phone more than I'd admit. Not because I wanted to cave, but because I couldn't believe how far it had gone. I kept wondering what would have happened if I'd just let it slide. If I'd let them take the trip and said nothing, would they have ever offered to pay me back? Or would it have just become another quiet expectation? Another thing I swallowed to keep the family afloat? I didn't miss the drama. I didn't miss the financial drain. But I did miss the idea of them, the version of my parents I used to believe in. The ones who taught me right from wrong, who told me never to take what wasn't mine. It was like mourning people who were still alive. One night, I saw a text from Josh. Just a photo of his car back on the road with the caption, "Made it to work on time. Thanks again, man." I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. And that was the difference. I hadn't cut everyone off. I just needed space. Real space. And they needed to learn that apologies don't come with conditions, especially not ones wrapped in social pressure and backdoor guilt trips. I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do about them, but for the first time I didn't feel rushed. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to let them in either. It was almost 2 months before I saw them again. 2 full months of silence. No calls, no texts, nothing from anyone they might have roped in. I thought maybe they'd finally given up, accepted it. Maybe they were just waiting it out until someone cracked. Then on a Saturday afternoon, I came home from running errands and found my parents' car parked across the street from my building. It was the older one, the one my dad usually drove when he didn't want to burn gas. They'd been sitting there long enough for condensation to fog the windows. I stood on the sidewalk for a second holding a bag of groceries, just looking at them. The windows were up, engine off. My mom waved when she saw me. I didn't wave back. I walked upstairs slowly, took my time putting things away, sat on the couch and waited. They didn't buzz the intercom until 10 minutes later. I let them stand out there for 5 more before I opened the door. They looked tired. Not broken, not desperate, just smaller than I remembered, like all the weight they'd thrown around before had collapsed inward. My dad started with the usual. "We just wanted to talk. It's been long enough. We're not here to fight. My mom stood next to him, not saying much. She looked like she'd been crying for a while before they even got there. I let them in. Not because I forgave them. I just didn't want to have the conversation in front of my neighbors. We sat in the living room. No coffee, no snacks, just straight into it. They said sorry, a real apology this time. No excuses. No, we thought you'd be okay with it, or we were going to pay you back anyway. Just an acknowledgement of what they did. That they violated my trust. That they treated me like a solution, not a son. They said they'd been talking to someone. A family counselor apparently, and they were trying to figure out how they ended up here, why they'd gotten so comfortable expecting things from me, and why they didn't see it until it was too late. I listened. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I told them they made me feel like I was just a backup plan. That I didn't want revenge. I wanted boundaries. I told them I wasn't going to pretend nothing happened. And then I told them the new rule. No more access. No shared accounts. No passwords. No financial ties. Not for them, not for Josh. If they needed something, they'd have to ask. And I had the right to say no. Always. My dad nodded. My mom did too. That was the first moment I believed they might actually get it. When they left, my mom hugged me. I let her. I didn't hug back. But I didn't pull away either. They didn't ask for anything. No favors, no money, just left. A week later, Josh called. Said he got offered a permanent role at the warehouse, benefits and all. Then he paused, awkward for a second, and said the brakes on the car were going out again. He asked if I could help, not pay for it, just lend him the money until the first paycheck cleared. I almost said no out of principle. But then I thought about how he'd left quietly, worked the job, and stayed out of the family drama. He'd done what I asked even when it sucked. So I said, fine. I sent him $1,200. No speech, no conditions. But I didn't tell our parents. This was between him and me. And even though I still hadn't fully forgiven them, I realized something after that call. You don't have to burn the bridge. You just don't have to walk across it anymore. 3 months after everything unraveled, things started to settle. Not back to how they were. That part was long gone. But into something less hostile, more quiet, like the ground after a storm. Damp and weirdly peaceful. Josh texted me now and then. Nothing dramatic, just normal stuff. Updates about work, memes, even a dumb video of his car stereo cutting out mid-song. He paid back $200 of the $1,200 already without me asking. That meant more than any long apology ever could. I didn't reply every time, but I didn't ignore him either. We weren't best friends, but we weren't strangers anymore. As for my parents, we didn't talk much. They respected the space I asked for. I think they finally understood I wasn't bluffing. Every now and then, I'd get a forwarded recipe from my mom with no message attached, or a photo from my dad of some project he was building in the garage. I didn't respond, but I didn't block them either. One Sunday, I saw them at the farmer's market. We locked eyes for a second. My dad raised his hand a little. My mom smiled in that cautious way people do when they're trying not to assume too much. I nodded. That was it. Just a nod. But it didn't feel tense. It just felt real. That night, I went home, cooked a meal I knew my mom used to make, and didn't cry or get nostalgic. I just ate it alone in the quiet. I didn't want to hate them. I never did. I just wanted to stop being the only one who had to hold everything together. A few weeks later, Josh asked if we could meet for lunch. He offered to pay. I said yes. We sat at this little diner near the warehouse where he worked. He told me he was getting a promotion, maybe moving out of state next year. Said he was nervous but excited. Said none of it would have happened without that loan. Then he asked me something I didn't expect. Do you think they'll ever really change? I didn't answer right away. I just sipped my coffee and stared out the window. Then I told him, maybe not. But that wasn't really the point anymore. They could change or not. They could get better or stay the same. But I wasn't going to let them take anything more from me. Not money, not peace, not guilt. We split the check. He left the tip. When I got home, I opened the old group chat with my parents and typed out one line. I'm not angry anymore, but I still need space. My mom replied within a minute. That's okay. We're here when you're ready. I didn't write back. I just turned off my phone and sat on the balcony watching cars pass below, none of them stopping. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a thing. Not even forgiveness, just clarity. And I finally had that. Spring came in slow, soft layers, the kind of weather that makes you want to open all the windows but still keep a hoodie nearby. It was subtle, like everything else in my life now. Subtle but different. I hadn't spoken to my parents directly since that message. They respected it. No calls, no guilt, just occasional digital breadcrumbs. A forwarded article, a photo of the dog sleeping in a weird position, a thinking of you message from my mom every couple of weeks. Nothing over the line, just enough to let me know they were still there. I didn't respond to most of them, not because I was still angry, just because I wasn't ready to be pulled back into the gravity of what used to be. The old way of things where my silence meant agreement and my help was expected without question. Josh was doing better. He called now and then, sometimes to vent about work, other times just to talk. He paid me back in full by the end of May. I didn't remind him, he just did it. And with every payment, he'd add a little comment like, "Gas was cheaper this week," or "Still owe you lunch." He made it a point not to make it weird. And that helped more than he probably realized. We met for dinner once, a proper one, not fast food. He insisted on paying again, even left a tip big enough to make the waitress double-check the receipt. Afterward, he said he was looking at apartments in Asheville, thinking of starting fresh somewhere with more space and fewer expectations. I told him it sounded like a good move. He smiled and said it was nice to hear that without someone turning it into a lecture. Then he asked if I'd ever go home again. Not just visit, go home. I didn't answer right away. The truth was I didn't know. Home had become complicated. It wasn't a place anymore. It was a feeling I didn't trust. The smell of our living room, the sound of my dad's laugh, the way my mom used to cut fruit for breakfast. It all felt like memories that belonged to someone else now. But I told him, maybe, not now, but maybe one day. That night, I got another text from my mom. No pressure, but we're doing a family cookout next weekend. Josh said you might want to come. There's a spot saved if you change your mind. I didn't reply. I stared at it, then locked my phone. Saturday came. I didn't go, but I didn't feel bad about it. I went hiking instead, alone. No guilt, no explanations. Just air, trees, and the sound of gravel under my boots. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't anger or distance or obligation. I felt like myself again. Not their fixer, not their fallback. Just Ethan. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My mom slapped me because my brother said I stole money from them for the mortgage. I said it was not true and exposed his intentions to steal all their money to run away. It all started the night of my parents' anniversary dinner. We just finished eating and, for once, the atmosphere was surprisingly warm. My mom and dad were laughing about an inside joke they always told at these celebrations. Tom, my older brother, even joined in, which was rare because he usually acted like he was too cool for family stuff. Then, out of nowhere, Tom said, "I need to bring something up." Everyone fell silent. Tom never needed to bring something up. He thrived on not being disturbed. So when he struck that serious tone, I thought, what now? He looked right at me, his expression hard. I wasn't going to say anything, but it's been bothering me for weeks. "Mom, Dad, there's money missing. A lot of money, and I know who took it." My stomach dropped. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the look on his face told me exactly who he was going to blame. "She did it," he said, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Excuse me?" I asked, caught between laughing at how ridiculous this was and the growing knot of fear in my stomach. Tom didn't even hesitate. "The 13 grand you had saved up for the mortgage? It's gone. And the only person who could have taken it is her." My mom gasped, and my dad's face darkened in a way I'd never seen before. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I shot back immediately. "I don't even know where you keep the money, let alone how much there is. 13 grand? How would I even know that?" And that's when I realized Tom had slipped up. He'd said the exact amount. How would he know the total unless... "Because you've been digging around." I blurted it out. That's how you know. My mom's face snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. Don't turn this around on your brother. Do you think he's accusing you for no reason? Yeah. Tom chimed in, his voice calm. You've always had a hard time taking responsibility. Just admit it, and maybe Mom and Dad will go easy on you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was a full-blown setup, and he was good at it. But the worst part? My parents were hanging on every word. My dad stood up abruptly. We're going to check the hiding place right now. I followed them into their room, my heart pounding. Tom stayed behind, casually leaning against the dining room table as if he had nothing to worry about. When my dad opened the small safe they'd hidden in their closet, the money was gone. Every dollar. My mom turned to me, her face pale but angry. Where is it? I don't know, pleaded. I didn't take it. Why would I take it? But they wouldn't listen. They talked over me, accused me of breaking their trust, and threatened to throw me out if I didn't return the money. My dad even mentioned calling the police if I didn't come clean. That's when it hit me. Tom wasn't just accusing me for fun. He'd planned it. He wanted them to turn on me completely. By the time they were done screaming, I was too overwhelmed to stay. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and left the house without saying another word. That night, I crashed at my friend Emma's house, shaking with anger and disbelief. But as much as I wanted to crumble under the weight of it all, I knew one thing. Tom wouldn't get away with this. Emma didn't ask too many questions when I showed up at her door with a hastily packed bag. She just gave me a long hug and sat me down on her couch. That's the thing about Emma. She knows when not to pry. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling back to Tom's smirk, the way he had everyone eating out of his hand. It was as if he'd rehearsed it all. And the way my parents had looked at me, like I was some stranger who'd come into their lives to ruin everything. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing. Tom was behind this, and I was going to prove it. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went back to the house. My parents were both at work by then, and I figured Tom would be at his college classes. I still had my key, so I let myself in and went straight to his room. I started with his desk, but it was mostly a mess. Old notebooks, loose papers, random junk. Then I looked under his mattress, in his drawers, and even in his guitar case. Nothing. But then I opened the closet. Hidden behind a row of neatly hung shirts was a small box. When I lifted the lid, my heart almost stopped. The money. All of it. My hands trembled as I pulled out the bundles. It wasn't just randomly stuffed in there. He had packed it neatly, like he was planning to take it somewhere. I could have just taken the money and left, but I knew better. If I showed up with it, they'd probably still blame me, say I was returning it to cover my tracks. I needed something solid, something that would prove Tom's intentions beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's when I noticed his laptop on the desk. I hesitated. It felt wrong to snoop, but then again, he hadn't exactly played fair. I opened it and, thankfully, it wasn't password protected. His browser history was a smoking gun. Recent searches included best places to live in Miami, start a new life with savings, and high-yield investments for quick returns. One tab still open was a real estate listing for a studio apartment in Florida. I used my phone to take pictures of everything. His search history, the apartment listing, even the money in the closet. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Then I put everything back the way I'd found it and left. When I got back to Emma's, I showed her the evidence. She stared at the pictures in disbelief. He was going to run away with the money? She asked. Looks like it, I said. And he was going to make me take the fall for it. Her face hardened. What are you going to do? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to confront him alone, to demand answers. But then I realized he'd just twist the story like he always did. No, this time I needed everyone in the same room, Tom, my parents, and me. I'm going back tonight, I said. And I'm going to finish this. I spent the rest of the day rehearsing what I was going to say. Every time I went through it, I imagined my parents' faces. How angry, how hurt they'd been. But this time I had proof. They had to believe me. When evening came, I called my mother. I kept my voice calm and said I needed to come home to talk. She didn't sound thrilled but told me to come over after dinner. By the time I got there, Tom was already on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he didn't care. My parents were at the dining room table, cleaning up after their meal. The tension in the room was suffocating. My dad looked up first. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to all of you," I said, stepping inside. "It's important." My mother crossed her arms, already skeptical. "If it's about the money, we've heard enough excuses." "It's not an excuse," I shot back. "It's the truth and I can prove it." Tom looked up from his phone, his expression bored. "Here we go," he muttered. I ignored him and took out my phone. First of all, the money isn't missing. It's in Tom's closet. That got their attention. My dad leaned forward. "What did you just say?" "I said the money is in his closet," I repeated. $13,000 neatly packed in a box. "I saw it myself this morning." Tom's face twitched, but he recovered quickly. "You're lying," he said, shaking his head. "She probably put it there to frame me." I held up my phone. "Really? Then explain this." I flipped through the photos I'd taken, the cash, the closet, and finally the browser history. I laid out everything I'd found. My parents leaned in, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief as they looked at the evidence. "Moving to Miami? High-yield investments?" My dad said, reading one of the screenshots. He turned to Tom. "What the hell is this?" Tom sat up straighter, his face a mask of indignation. "She's making this up. Do you really think I'd steal from you? She's just trying to cover her tracks." "Why would I do that, Tom?" I shot back. "Why would I steal money I didn't even know existed until you accused me?" That's when my mom spoke up, her voice low. "You knew the exact amount," she said, looking at Tom. His face paled. "That's right," I said, pressing the point. "You said 13,000 before Dad even opened the safe. How would you know that if you hadn't already counted it?" Tom opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was trapped and we all knew it. My father stood over him. "Tell me the truth, Tom. Right now." For a moment, it looked like he might continue to lie, but then he deflated, sinking back into the couch. "Fine," he muttered. "I took it. Okay? I was going to put it back after I sorted some things out." "After you sorted some things out?" my dad repeated, his voice rising. "You were going to run away with our money." Tom tried to explain, but my dad wasn't having it. He turned to my mom. "Call the police." "No, wait." Tom jumped up, panic in his voice now. "I'm going. I'll leave right now. You'll never see me again. Just don't call the cops." The room fell silent. My father stared at him, his jaw clenched. Then he nodded. "You're leaving tonight. Take your things and go. And don't come back." Tom stood frozen, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And here, my dad reached into his wallet and pulled out a $50 bill. He slipped it into Tom's hand. "For food. It's the last thing you'll ever get from me." Tom didn't say another word. He packed a bag and left that night, slamming the door behind him. After Tom left, the house was eerily quiet. My parents and I sat in the living room, the tension thick. I thought it was over. I had proven my innocence and Tom was gone. But something wasn't right. My father broke the silence first. "I can't believe he did this to us," he said, rubbing his face. "To his own family." My mom nodded, but her gaze was distant, like she was working through something in her head. "We need to check the rest of the house," she said suddenly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She stood, her movements sharp. "If he was planning to run away, who's to say this is the only money he took? What if he's been stealing from us for years?" My father's eyes widened, and he stood up too. "You're right. Let's check everything." I didn't think they'd find anything else. Tom had already confessed and the 13 grand was the big prize. But I followed them anyway. As they searched every hiding place in the house, the reality set in. The safe in their room? Empty. The emergency stash in the kitchen cupboard? Gone. Even the little box my mom kept in the garage for odd money? Nothing. When we were done, the total was staggering. Tom hadn't just taken the mortgage money. He'd taken over $20,000 from every hiding place my parents had. My mother sat down hard at the dining room table, her face pale. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know," my father said, pacing the room. "But I'll call the bank tomorrow. We need to check our accounts. If he got into them." He didn't finish the thought. I felt sick. As much as I wanted to believe that Tom had just made a terrible decision, the evidence was mounting that he'd been planning this for a long time. And then, as if the universe wasn't done with us yet, there was a knock at the door. It was almost midnight, and none of us were expecting anyone. My father moved cautiously, opening the door just enough to see who it was. A man stood on the porch dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. He looked out of place, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Can I help you?" my father asked, his voice suspicious. The man hesitated. "I'm looking for Tom," he finally said. "Is he here?" My father frowned. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked over my dad's shoulder as if to see if anyone else was home. I need to talk to him. It's important." "He's not here," my father said firmly. "And he's not coming back. Now, if you don't mind." The man stepped forward, cutting him off. "Look, I don't want any trouble, okay? I just need the money he owes me. That's all." My mom and I froze. "What money?" my dad demanded. The man sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't know all the details, but he said he'd pay me back after he made some moves. He borrowed $5,000 a few months ago. Said he'd double it by now. But I haven't heard from him in weeks, and I'm getting tired of waiting. $5,000. On top of the $20,000 he'd already taken from my parents." My dad's face turned red. "It's gone," he said firmly. "And you're getting nothing from us." The man didn't look surprised, but he didn't leave either. "Just tell him I stopped by," he said before walking off into the night. We stood there in silence, trying to process what had just happened. "Who was that?" my mother finally asked. "I have no idea," my dad said. "But I don't think this is over." Neither did I. After the man left, we locked the doors and sat in the living room, trying to make sense of it all. My parents looked exhausted, like they'd aged 10 years in one night. I didn't feel much better. "Who knows how many people he owes?" my father muttered. "And now they're coming here. What if more show up? We can't just sit here and wait," my mother said, her voice sharp. "We have to do something. Maybe call the police." I hesitated. "But if we call the police, it could make things worse. What if Tom panics and does something stupid? Or what if that guy comes back angry because he thinks we ratted him out?" My dad sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "We shouldn't even have to deal with this. He's the one who made this mess." We fell silent, the weight of the situation weighing on us. I thought about Tom's searches on his laptop, the money, the Miami apartment. He'd clearly been planning this escape for a while. But something about the guy at the door didn't add up. If Tom was getting ready to leave, why borrow more money? I decided to take another look at the photos I'd taken. I zoomed in on the browser tabs in one of the screenshots, hoping for a clue. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A tab labeled cryptocurrency. "Wait a minute," I said, sitting up. "What?" my mom asked. "I think Tom was investing the money," I said, pointing to my phone. "He wasn't just planning to run away. He was trying to make more money before he left." My dad leaned over to look. "Cryptocurrency? Isn't that risky?" "Very," I said. "But it explains a lot. If he was losing money, he'd have to borrow to cover his tracks. That guy at the door? He's probably just one of many." My mother looked horrified. "So all of this, it's not just stealing from us. He's gambling with our future." My dad stood up abruptly. "We need to check his room again." "Why?" I asked. "Because if he's hiding this, there could be more we've missed. And I want to know exactly what we're up against." Reluctantly, I followed them back upstairs. We combed through Tom's room again, checking every nook and cranny. Felt pointless at first. What else could there be? Then my mom pulled out a shoebox from under his bed. Inside were envelopes stuffed with receipts, bank statements, and scribbled notes. My father began to sort through them, and one piece of paper immediately caught his attention. "Look at this," he said, holding up a withdrawal slip from the bank. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The amount, $10,000. "That's not from the house money," my mother said, her voice shaking. "This is from our savings account." My dad's hand shook as he flipped through more papers. "This one's for $5,000 and another for $3,000. He's been draining our accounts for months." My stomach dropped. "But how? Don't you check your bank statements?" "We trusted him," my mother said quietly. "He knew the login information. He said he'd help manage things while we were busy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tom hadn't just stolen the money at home. He'd been systematically draining my parents' savings. "What do we do now?" I asked. My dad put the papers down, his jaw clenched. "We'll go to the bank first thing tomorrow. Then we'll deal with the police." But before anyone could say another word, there was a loud bang on the front door. We froze. This time it wasn't a knock. It was a bang, like someone was trying to break it down. My dad grabbed the nearest object, a fireplace poker, and headed downstairs. My mom and I followed, hearts pounding. When he opened the door, there was another man, taller and angrier than the one before. "I'm not leaving until I get my money," he growled. The man at the door was taller than the first, his face hard with anger. He pushed a piece of paper toward my dad. It looked like some kind of IOU with Tom's signature on it. $5,000, the man barked. "He promised to pay me back last week. Where is it?" My dad didn't flinch, holding the fireplace poker tightly. "Tom's not here. And if you don't leave, I'm calling the police." "You think I'm afraid of the cops?" the man snapped. "I don't care who pays me, Tom, I don't care. But I'm not leaving without my money." My mother stepped forward, shaking but steady. "We're victims in this too," she said. "Tom stole from us. We don't owe you anything." The man sneered. "Then you can explain that to the rest of the people he owes." That's when I snapped. "You think threatening us will help? We're broke because of him. You want your money? Find Tom and take it up with him. He's the liar, not us." My outburst took him by surprise. He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed and stepped back. "Fine," he said, turning to leave. "But if I find out you're hiding him..." He didn't finish the sentence before walking off into the night. After he left, we locked every door and window, the reality of the situation sinking in. My father slumped into a chair, the fireplace poker still in his hand. "We can't wait any longer," he said. "We're going to the police tomorrow. Tom has dug us into a hole, and it's time he paid for it." The next morning, we went to the police station with everything. Tom's receipts, the IOUs, the photos of the cash, and the evidence from his laptop. The officer we spoke with didn't seem surprised. "We've seen cases like this before," he said. "The family trusts the wrong person, and things spiral out of control. We'll get a warrant for his arrest." Hearing those words was a gut punch. No matter what Tom had done, he was still my brother. But he'd crossed too many boundaries. It was time he faced the consequences. 2 weeks later, they found him. He'd been living out of a cheap motel, using what little money he had left to stay off the grid. When they brought him in, he didn't deny anything. He admitted to stealing from us, borrowing from shady people, and planning to disappear. The trial was messy. Tom got a plea deal to avoid jail time but was ordered to pay restitution to my parents and attend mandatory financial counseling. He also had to cut all ties with the people he owed money to, which wasn't going to be easy. As for us, the damage was done. With most of their savings gone, my parents were left scrambling to pay the bills and the mortgage. My dad had to pick up extra shifts at work, and my mom started taking on freelance gigs to bring in more income. I moved back home to help out. It was awkward at first. There were still so many raw emotions, but we worked through it. I took on more hours at my own job and started helping out with food and utilities. We sold a few things to make ends meet. An old car, some jewelry my mother had stopped wearing, and even some antiques my father had been collecting for years. It was painful to see these things go, but we had no choice. Slowly, we began to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible, like we'd never get out of the hole Tom had left us in. But my parents never gave up, and neither did I. We stopped hearing from Tom after his conviction. Part of me wanted to hate him, but mostly I just felt sad. He'd thrown it all away, our trust, his future. For what? A gamble that didn't pay off. Now, months later, things are finally starting to stabilize. My parents still struggle sometimes, but they're stronger than I ever gave them credit for. We laugh more now, if only to keep from crying. And me? I've learned a lot about resilience, about family, and about the people you think you know. I don't think I'll ever fully trust Tom again, but I've come to terms with that. We'll make it. We may not have much right now, but we have each other. And that's enough. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.